Missiles continue to fly between Israel and the Gaza Strip. More civilians dying in horrific ways. And while Israel has a right to defend itself, what about those innocents who are being blown to bits? Could the Israelis not temper their attack with a more judicious approach? Names are being bandied about, seem more like hopes than educated guesses when it comes to who will carry the Democratic torch in 2016. Is Elizabeth Warren the best the left can bring to challenge Hillary Clinton? And do the Republicans honestly need a Clinton as their opponent? And one father took the law into his own hands, and the law has no problem with it whatsoever. Neither perhaps would you if it were your child being accosted. The answers you won't get on any of the alphabet networks because they do not question everything as we do. The fastest 3 hours of news for Tuesday, July 22nd, 2014. Also on the docket, Ron Paul takes on the issue of MH Flight 17 and Russian involvement, becoming a darling of the Russian media. Perhaps he wants to rethink his opinion. That's my commentary and telling it like it is later on this hour. Now it's a turn to John Bachman in this edition of Newsmax Now.
Thank you for that, Ed. The Obama administration just may have been dealt a major blow to Obamacare. At a federal appeals court hearing today, the panel decided that most of Obamacare's subsidies are illegal. The Obama administration says those subsidies will keep flowing in the meantime while they appeal the court's decision. The ruling says that aid to purchase health care can only be granted to people who bought insurance plans under Obamacare through the exchanges run by the states or the District of Columbia, not the federally run website or the federal exchanges. Today's ruling may lead to the abandoning of health care plans by millions of people. Sources say coverage may no longer be affordable without those government tax credits. Of course, the Obama administration will appeal that, and they say those subsidies will continue to flow. Meantime, at the U.S.-Mexico border, the Obama administration continues to take most of the blame for the influx of nearly 60,000 illegal immigrants over the last 9 months. Over on Newsmax.com, we're reporting that the White House has ignored warning signs at the border for years. The story also describes the president's cloudy immigration strategy and how this really stems from his 2012 re-election campaign and the Democratic push for immigration reform. Now, as a result, Texas Governor Rick Perry is now sending 1,000, or 1,000, I should clarify, 1,000 National Guard troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. Perry said yesterday that he decided to take this action himself after the feds failed to step up. As you can imagine, the White House not exactly thrilled with the decision and offered this response.
I know that Governor Perry is hopeful that it will have us send an important symbol. Now, I will say that we haven't received the formal communication that you typically get from a state official when they make a request like this. So we'll see if Governor Perry follows through on his public announcement with the communication that's necessary to begin this kind of deployment.
Well, the White House has continued to push Perry for his help in pushing immigration reform. Also, more help from Congress on that front as well. Moving on now to the story taking place in the Middle East, the bloodshed in Gaza. And it brought UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry to Cairo for a new round of ceasefire talks. And we're hearing now today Ban Ki-moon saying he's fairly confident that the fighting will end soon as a result of this recent emergency discussion that's taking place in Cairo. Also, want to point out today Delta announcing that it's going to cancel flights into Tel Aviv, Israel. Delta, one of the major global air carriers, announcing cancellations of flights into that war-torn region. John Kerry also they're comparing Operation Protective Edge to some other past conflicts. Kerry was set to meet with the Arab League chief, but at this time there were no concrete plans to have face-to-face meetings with officials from Qatar, Turkey, Israel, or the West Bank. More ahead, more news in 30 minutes. Now here's Ed.
We are not punishing the Palestinian people for what Hamas is doing. We are trying to target these tunnels, the places in which they hide weapons and missiles. The beginning of these tunnels are within the population centers. They are calling the people, their own people, to stay in places in which we call them to live because we need to target and to act against these tunnels. You know, I know that, and believe me, it's not like the world is feeling uncomfortable. We feel uncomfortable as well.
Rumored discussions of a ceasefire are little more than a whisper in the explosive din still being heard on the ground in Israel and the Gaza Strip. Missiles continue flying between the two sides, and now the Israeli military has brought in their air power to strike at the heart of Hamas. While Israel reserves and deserves the right to defend itself, what is happening to the civilian population in Gaza has the world more than a little shocked and more than a bit angry. Greater steps are not being taken to separate the innocents from the terrorists. Let us welcome in MidPoint, Senior Fellow and Chair for the Study of Islamic Radicalism at the Potomac Institute for Policy Studies and a former Islamic extremist from Egypt, Dr. Tawfiq Hamid. Dr. Hamid, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be with you. Thanks.
There is the first question right there. There is now discussion that Israel is going after military individuals, those connected with Hamas. They are going after them in private homes with rockets, and there are civilians that are being killed. The world wants to know, as advanced as the Israeli military is, could they not do a better job in not having so much, and I hate to use this phrase, but it's used in military terms, collateral damage?
It's unavoidable. The collateral damage here is unavoidable. Like trying to remove cancer, sometimes you have to get some of the normal flesh around it. And when you see here the situation, you have to blame Hamas first for these casualties, because Israel actually is trying to be very precise in its operations. Had Israel was not precise in its operations, the casualties would have been 100 times more. So we are dealing here with the situation where Hamas members hide among civilians, put their weapons inside civilian places, and then they go blame Israel. If someone to be blamed for the killing of the hundreds of civilians, it is Hamas, not Israel.
But let's be fair, because that's what we want to do here. A New York Times report talked about this specific story, that a specific family, the Abu Jameh family, according to relatives, had a guest in the home. This guest was identified as Ahmad Suleiman Sakmoud, a member of Hamas's military wing who was visiting a member of the family. There was one member of Hamas there. The rockets took out the apartment and killed the entire family. Is it not fair to say, though, that Israel still needs to take great strides in order to make sure that as many civilians as possible do not die in situations reportedly such as this?
Look, Israel has two options: either to attack this militant, and there will be some civilian casualties, or do not attack him and let him attack the Israeli civilians and kill them. So, and when you put in consideration that Hamas is the one that started the attacks on Israel, then you blame no one in this situation but the Hamas member who went to his civilian family, or friend. So I think in this situation, we need to realize that some Palestinian civilians are suffering. Yes, we agree, we accept this. However, the cause of their suffering is Hamas organization, and the only way to stop their suffering is to weaken Hamas, defeat it, and prevent it from doing this again and again.
Let's listen again to what John Kerry has had to say, the American Secretary of State in Cairo right now, seeking to form some sort of a bond or find some sort of a way to at least stop the shelling. He was in Egypt to speak with the Egyptian foreign minister about brokering the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Here's what the Secretary had to say.
We are hopeful that this visit will result in a ceasefire that provides the necessary security for the Palestinian people, and that we can commence to address the medium and long-term issues related to Gaza.
All right, now that was one of the foreign ministers talking specifically about it now. When we talk about the fact that Hamas has turned down a number of potential ceasefires here, we keep hearing that it's because it is an Egyptian-sponsored ceasefire proposal. Now there is word out that Hamas will only accept it if it comes from Qatar or Turkey, two states where the Muslim Brotherhood is still in power and is still working with these two countries right now. Seriously, though, are those two countries about really to create any sort of a possible ceasefire here, or is this just a stalling tactic by Hamas?
Tactic by Hamas, because Egypt is the country that actually suffered most for the Palestinian cause. We, as I'm an Egyptian, basically, we went into wars against Israel several times in history because of the Palestinians. And the border with the Palestinians is not in the hands of Turkey or Qatar. We are the ones who have the geographical border with Hamas. So Hamas, by doing this, is just trying to delay the process and continue attacks on Israel and continue the fight, because the more prolonged the fight is, the more Hamas will be able to gain more money from donations. They go everywhere in the world and ask for donations for your fellow Palestinian brothers, your fellow Muslim brothers. They go to mosques, they go everywhere to collect more money. For them, the prolongation of the war is directly for their benefit, especially when they have been defeated politically in different places because of their affiliation to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Is there a peaceful solution here, or are we kidding ourselves every time we think those words?
Look, peaceful solutions can happen when the evildoers are defeated. Like in the Nazi, for example, when he was defeated, Hitler, and the Nazi system, then we started to have peace. Without have serious defeat for Hamas organization and for the Islamic radical groups, here defeat both militarily and non-militarily defeat by all ways. This is the first step toward having peaceful solution. There are some peaceful solutions through education, through media. You can change the mindset of people. You can use religion in a different form, reformed interpretations to prevent the anti-Semitism in the Arab and Muslim world. However, without this stage of military defeat, and it has to be completed. It's like a doctor here. You give half dose of antibiotic, you lose, but you have to give full dose here to defeat the opponent. And once the opponent is defeated, as we have seen in history, like the Nazi, peace happened after that. So both together are two steps, one followed by the other. But you can't just go now and ask for peaceful resolutions before defeating such groups.
Are you equating Hamas with the Nazis?
They are, in my view, worse, because their first part of the charter of Hamas, go read it after our talk, it states clearly that their mission is to annihilate all the Jews, to kill every Jew. So if this is their mission, tell me what's the difference between Hamas and the Nazis then?
As we have seen in Iraq, the fighting there is not limited to Jews versus Muslims here. Now we have Palestinians and Israelis. Can you compare this? Is this a mirror of Israel, what is happening in other countries as well when we talk about religious sects and factions going at each other for generations?
Look, the comparison here, there is some similarities, which is radical Islamists in Hamas or in other Islamic groups like Daesh or Al-Nusra in Syria. They are all the enemies of humanity, of civilizations. In the Palestinian area, they attack Israel. In Iraq, they attack Christians and even Muslims who do not follow the same views. They kill Shia, they attack the Sufis. So the concept here is you deal with an enemy that does not want to accept the other. It's like Hamas does not want to accept the existence of Israel. It is the same Daesh and the other radical group do not want the existence of Shia or Christians. That's why they kicked them out of Mosul. But when you compare them at quantitative level, there is no comparison, because the civilian casualties, for example, in Israel is unintentional. But in Daesh or ISIS group in Syria and Iraq, the civilian casualties are intentional. They behead people intentionally to create fear among the other, to subjugate to them. So there is no comparison at the quantitative level of the deaths. In fact, the number of deaths in Syria and Iraq has exceeded thousands of innocents in the last few weeks. So we are dealing with a real humanitarian situation compared to something that could be much smaller than what's happening really in Iraq and Syria against our civilization. I will not call it's against Christians only or Shia or liberal Muslims, against all our civilization.
I only have about 15 seconds left. We've heard the possibility of an occupation of Gaza by the Israeli army. Would that be smart?
It can be smart if it is well planned, and it will end completely the power of Hamas, because when Israel started this, it has to continue it till the end. Otherwise, all the Israeli casualties will be lost for no reason. So Israel has to continue the mission to defeat Hamas and prevent its ability to launch attacks on Israel.
Dr. Tawfiq Hamid, thank you so much for joining us today. We will do it again, sir.
My pleasure.
It is a story we're going to keep following all day long. Next up, let's just give Hillary Clinton the Democratic presidential nomination right now and cease all this unnecessary prattle. or perhaps not. That's coming up next, right here on MidPoint, where we question everything.
The following is an important message for all men. Are you urinating more frequently? Do you wake up to urinate? Are you having a slower, weaker stream? By 50, half of all men already have a prostate issue, and it only gets worse with age. Don't ignore the warning signs of an aging prostate. Call or go online in the next 10 minutes and we'll ship you a free 30-day supply of Super Beta Prostate, the best-selling non-prescription formula for prostate support. Super Beta Prostate is guaranteed to support a more complete emptying of your bladder, a fuller, stronger stream, and less waking at night to urinate. Super Beta Prostate has a trusted 10-year history in prostate care, having shipped over 6 million bottles.
I've gotten used to getting up multiple times a night and, I kind of adapted to that, you might say. I thought that was maybe normal. Once I started taking Super Beta, now it's down to 0.
Now with Super Beta, I find that I can comfortably get to my destination without the concern of this uncontrollable urge to want to use the bathroom.
Super Beta Prostate is a product that I really like. I endorse it. I use it myself. I have done the research on the ingredients. I was very pleasantly surprised that Super Beta Prostate helped me fairly quickly.
Super Beta Prostate is available without a prescription. It's formulated with a special and natural plant enzyme called beta-cytosterol, which was shown in multiple clinical studies to support healthy prostate function. Super Beta Prostate is so powerful, you'd have to take 100 saw palmetto pills to get the same sterols as just one Super Beta Prostate tablet. So don't ignore the warning signs of your aging prostate. Get your free bottle of Super Beta Prostate today. Due to extremely limited supplies, only one free bottle per household. Call right now to get your free bottle while it's still free. Go to superbeta.com or call 800-494-2084. 800-494-2084. 800-494-2084.
Now on Newsmax TV. Barack Obama says he wants to fix the border, but what's his real agenda? And who is really behind the children's invasion? Watch The Malsberg Show on Newsmax TV.
She is here solely for one reason, to publicly and definitively declare her candidacy for the President of the United States.
I think I speak for everybody when I say no one cares, they just want to know if you're running for president.
I was going to make an announcement, but I saw, you kind of spoiled it for me.
No.
Yeah,
please.
no,
So that's a yes. I'm going to go with that's a yes.
The big spoiler. So, I'm just going to have to reconsider
sure.
where I go do
There's a little confusion here. Do you like commuting to work or do you like a home office? What's your...
I've spent so many years commuting, I'd kind of prefer a home office.
Oh. Would you like to have corners? Or would you like it not to have corners? I don't know.
I think that the world is so complicated, the fewer corners that you can have.
Didn't get to furniture. If one is to listen to the minor and very early ground shaking emanating from the political left, Hillary Clinton is not the shoo-in she was once thought to be for the Democratic presidential nomination. Critics talk of a bumbling book tour, stumbling comments about being broke, and a certain name keeps coming up as the likely best choice. In any case such as this, there is that gnawing need for some context and maybe a good point about whom the right would prefer to be facing. Welcome back to MidPoint, former Deputy Staff Secretary to President Bill Clinton and veteran Democratic strategist David Goodfriend. David, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
David, I hold in my hand, I feel almost like a game show host, but I guess that's what politics really is at times, an article that says, without a shadow of a doubt, Hillary Clinton is completely inevitable for the Democrats in 2016. Put it all away. We're all done right here. Yes? No?
I think it's pretty dangerous for anybody to start measuring the curtains and the carpeting before there's an actual race. And I think Secretary Clinton is acutely aware of what happened in 2008 when she started to run a campaign as an inevitable candidate instead of just as a candidate. So it's my view that she would be unwise to consider it a shoo-in, and I don't think she does consider it a shoo-in. I think she's very, very conscious of how this has got to be earned. It's not a coronation. It has to be earned. She needs to present to Democrats the reason why she is the best candidate in the party to be president. And I think you're right to point out that there is some, I would call it animation, some energy coming from the left wing of the Democratic Party, most readily embodied in Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren from Massachusetts. But also, look, there are other people who are making noises about running for president. Governor Martin O'Malley from Maryland, even the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo. So there's no absence of variety among Democrats who would like to be president. I just think that in the case of Secretary Clinton, no one should assume anything, especially her.
In the case, though, of Elizabeth Warren, David, isn't it really more an enticing moment of perception instead of reality here? Because honestly, Mrs. Clinton has a tremendous amount of people behind her, a lot of backing, people who are saying that she is the one. Elizabeth Warren really doesn't have a whole lot of people here saying that she's the one. Oh, you have people asking her to get involved, but it seems to be much more perception and media-driven than reality.
I would agree with that. I think running a presidential campaign in this era is a multi-billion-dollar, extremely complex endeavor. And I say multi-billion because when you put it all together, all the candidates, all the outside spending, all the infrastructure, really does run into the billions of dollars. And it's not something that you can do on a whim. So if you're looking at a general election in 2016, the infrastructure has to be put in place now. I just was listening to an interview of Republican Marco Rubio, who said right up front on NPR, I need to make this decision over the next couple months, whether or not to run for president or run for re-election as senator. I think he's right. And the same applies to anybody on the Democratic side who would like to take a run at becoming president. Now is the time to be putting together that infrastructure. If you don't see it happening, that means the person is really not considering a run. Obviously, in the case of Hillary Clinton, she has a lot of surrogates around her who are putting together that infrastructure, ready for Hillary. A lot of the former staffers, my former colleagues from the White House, are making themselves available. That's an infrastructure, and it's a fundraising infrastructure as well. In the case of Elizabeth Warren, I don't think it's so much the literal fact of whether or not she's running. It's that you have elements of the Democratic Party that get genuinely enthusiastic about her and what she stands for. That ought to, and does, send signals to Secretary Clinton that if she wants to seek the Democratic nomination, she has to answer to that sentiment within the Democratic Party. She has to address it.
Would you agree then, from those who say that the base of the Democratic Party is just pining for a fight here? They want to see somebody else come in, 2 or 3 other really strong people to challenge Mrs. Clinton and energize the base. It's what they want more than really maybe what they need.
No, I would not characterize it that way. Instead, I would characterize it as the base wants to hear from Hillary Clinton how she's going to address some of their core needs and issues, I think most pointed of which is income inequality and the stagnation of working people's wages over the last 20 to 30 years, and what it's going to mean to the future of the country if you can't afford a college education for your kids, or if our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our telecommunications infrastructure is crumbling all around us. That's the kind of thing that the base of the party wants to hear from Mrs. Clinton. If they hear instead a kind of DLC redux, a kind of centrism circa 1992, I think they're going to be quite restive. And this is an interesting conundrum for Secretary Clinton. She knows that, as every presidential candidate does, to secure the nomination, you have to play to the base. To secure the general election win, you have to move to the center. My former boss, President Clinton, I thought was quite adroit at doing just that. And I think the challenge for Secretary Clinton or anybody in the Democratic Party today who wants to run for president, there is a very loud and vocal base that's extremely animated and concerned about disparate income, income inequality writ large, and what's going to be done about growth in the future. I think that's a very, very core concern among all Democrats, but especially on the left within the party, and any nominee is going to have to address it, as well as addressing how you become president.
Let's go to that specifically. I want to stop you right there when it comes down to the economy. There are those who say that it is foreign policy that drives a number of these nomination processes. But you just touched on this right now. Whether it's Mrs. Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, or anybody else, don't they really have to dig down into this populist agenda of the economy right now? Because if they go anyplace else right now, is it, again, fair to say that they're simply just missing the boat?
Well, I think that's going to be determined in large measure by international events beyond our control. I mean, you know, most Americans, I would argue right now, are fairly isolationist in their views, and that could change in an instant if there's God forbid, a domestic terrorist attack, for example. I mean, look at how 9/11 changed the equation politically for a good decade.
But as it stands right now, it would be the economy stupid.
Yeah, I firmly believe that. I think as it stands right now, but don't take my word for it. You can go to realpolitics.com and other sort of aggregating polling websites, and you can see where Americans rank their concerns. And jobs, economic growth, fairness in wages, these are things that really, really concern wide swaths of the American public. So I do believe right now this is about economic fairness and economic growth.
David, speaking from the left, how would you then opine on those who say that the Republican Party needs Hillary Clinton? It's the kind of a battle that they desperately need in order to energize their base, and that anything less simply would not get them as generated as they need to be to take back the White House.
I would dispute that view, because I think Hillary Clinton, what you just described is the Republican reaction to Hillary Clinton of the early 90s. You know, since that time, Hillary Clinton has been a United States senator with wide-ranging support in Republican counties and Democratic counties in New York. She's been Secretary of State and emerged extremely popular. Her favorability ratings today across the board among independents and Republicans as well, quite high. So I would caution my Republican friends against assuming that she's going to be a lightning rod in the culture wars like we had with Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton in 1996. It's just not going to be like that. We live in different times. She, in my view, in a general election, would have a greater appeal to the center. And that's precisely what her conundrum is in a primary, where the base of the party is looking lovingly at the far left in Elizabeth Warren. So
10 seconds I got left here. I got to put you on the spot. Biden, Cuomo, Brown, Sanders, Gillibrand, Warren, O'Malley. Which one strikes you immediately as one who could be a contender against Hillary?
I'm a fan of Martin O'Malley. He's my governor. I know him well. I think he's formidable, but I don't think he would win in a head-to-head against Hillary Clinton. He would only be formidable if she did not run for president.
All right, we now have it recorded. We have it down. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we use this again next time and as we move on towards the midterms in 2016. David, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for joining us. We'll do it again.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right, after the break, the latest world news from the Newsmax website mothership, and still ahead this hour, the words Ron Paul perhaps should have considered more thoroughly before putting them on electronic paper, because the Russians found them, and the Russians kind of like it. It's coming up right here on MidPoint, where we question everything.
Are you ready to take it all off this summer?
I took it all off, and I'm glad I did. 35 pounds gone.
If you said that I could get in a bathing suit again, I'd say you're crazy. But I did it.
There's still time to look hot and feel great this summer. And now, lose your first 5 pounds fast with a Fast 5 from Nutrisystem.
I've lost 40.5 pounds on Nutrisystem, and I feel fabulous.
You'll lose 5 pounds your first week or your money back, guaranteed.
I'm Erin, and I lost 30 pounds.
Order your 28-day My Way plan right now, and we'll rush you the Fast 5 free. You'll get 1 week of fantastic energizing shakes, 1 week of amazing Craving Crusher shakes, 1 week of delicious meals, all free. And the best news, call in the next 4 minutes and you'll also get the all-new smoothies, absolutely free. Millions of people have lost weight with Nutrisystem, and now you can too. Time is running out. Call now and get all this, plus 1 week of smoothies free. Don't wait.
Call 877-295-SIZE and lose your first 5 pounds free.
Look how beautiful it is.
Honey, we need to talk.
We do. I took the trash out.
I know, and thank you so much for that. I think we should get a Medicare supplement insurance plan.
Right now?
Whether you're new to Medicare or not, you may know it only covers about 80% of your Part B medical expenses. It's up to you to pay the difference. So think about an AARP Medicare supplement insurance plan. insured by United Healthcare Insurance Company. Like all standardized Medicare supplement insurance plans, they help cover some of what Medicare doesn't pay.
I did a little research. With a Medicare supplement plan, you'll be able to stay with your doctor.
Oh, you know, I love that guy.
These types of plans let you visit any doctor or hospital that accepts Medicare patients, and there are no networks.
Is this a one-size-fits-all kind of thing?
No, there are lots of plan options. It all depends on what we need and how much we want to spend.
Call now to request your free decision guide. It could help you find an AARP Medicare supplement plan that's right for you.
What happens when we travel?
The plans go with us, anywhere in the country.
I like that.
You know what else? United Healthcare Insurance Company has years and years of experience. What do you say?
I'm in.
Join the millions already enrolled in the only Medicare supplement insurance plans endorsed by AARP. Remember, all Medicare supplement plans help cover some of what Medicare doesn't pay and could really save you in out-of-pocket medical costs. You'll be able to choose your own doctor or hospital as long as they accept Medicare patients. And with these plans, there could be low or no copays.
You do your push-ups today?
Prepare to be amazed.
Don't wait. Call today to request your free decision guide and find the AARP Medicare supplement plan to go the distance with you. Go long.
And welcome to this Newsmax Now update. I'm John Bachman. Investigators from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe confirmed that pro-Russian rebels, and this is what they're saying here, have tampered with pieces of the downed Malaysia Airlines flight MH17, part of the wreckage as well. The rear of the plane, which is one of the biggest pieces of the wreckage that remained at the crash site in eastern Ukraine and wasn't completely burned up, has, quote, definitely been hacked into, that according to an OSCE spokesman. The cockpit has also been cut into with a saw, but authorities were not sure if that was to recover some bodies, rather, or tamper with the black boxes. Meantime, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry met the Egyptian president as part of a multinational effort to end the fighting between Israel and Hamas militants in Gaza. The immediate goal is a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, but reaching a truce isn't enough. According to John Kerry, Egypt has proposed a ceasefire plan that is backed by the U.S. and Israel, but of course it was rejected by Hamas. Now here in the States, a Delta flight headed from New York to Tel Aviv was diverted to Paris earlier today. The airline said that a rocket landed near Ben Gurion Airport. That was according to the Associated Press. All Delta flights have been canceled to Israel until further notice, and as we reported 30 minutes ago, that's one side of the story. An update now, several other major U.S. carriers, including U.S. Air and United, also canceling flights to Tel Aviv, Israel today. More news ahead in 30 minutes.
There is no global website with the variety and commentary the likes of our mothership here at Newsmax. Thus, we turn to managing editor Tim Colley to get some background on the very latest headlines. Tim, let's get right to it. Top of it is the news that we've been talking about here for the last couple of hours. Federal Appeals Court deals, I'll get that out one of these days. Federal Appeals Court deals major blow to Obamacare. Just another knock on Obamacare, and you almost get the feeling sometimes the White House almost expects these on a daily basis.
Yeah, this isn't quite the death blow, but this is a serious body blow. Basically, they said the federal government cannot subsidize Obamacare Obamacare insurance policies, which for the average person comes to about $4,400 a year. So you can see if you take away that subsidy, you're going to have a lot of people who can't afford this insurance.
Yeah, fair to say the devil's in the details with just about everything, and this comes down to a way that it was worded specifically is what the courts had a problem with here. So again, it comes down to getting yourself ready, making sure that you have everything correct the first time out of the box, which we have seen has been a real problem for Obamacare.
Yeah, essentially this was written that the states would provide the insurance. That's how the law was written. But many states opted out of it. So that left it to the federal government to provide these subsidies. And therein lies the problem. That's what the court found.
That is the leadoff. Right underneath that, though, in the illegal immigration crisis, we have Texas border sheriffs criticize Perry's National Guard plan here. Rick Perry got to the point where he was just tired, I guess, of not getting anybody to answer his phone calls at the White House, and he said it was time to call out the National Guard. This is something I think that a lot of people think is long overdue. People have been waiting for this for quite some time.
Yeah, outside the state of Texas, it sounds quite logical. I mean, what the sheriffs are basically saying is instead of paying to have National Guardsmen who don't have arrest authority, who don't really have training because they're soldiers, they're not civil police, put that money to hiring more deputies, more police officers. Now, the other side to that is Perry says these people are going to be running drones, essentially acting as spotters. They're going to be backups to the police department. They're not supposed to be police or frontline units.
Working on the Israeli-Hamas conflict right now. Next up, Israel says soldier missing. Kerry presses for truce. There was a lot of discussion as to whether or not an Israeli soldier actually was taken prisoner by Hamas. That has now been confirmed. And there is still a question as to whether or not people really want John Kerry there to try and broker a peace deal.
Yes, it's very unclear what his ideas are for a truce. As we saw from the Fox episode over the weekend, he just wanted to get there as quickly as possible when he had the open mic on. So there hasn't been a lot of ideas coming out of the Kerry camp about what exactly he's going to do that nobody else is doing to come up with a truce.
That and a whole lot more right at Newsmax.com. Check out the website. Tim Colley joins us every day to find out just exactly what is happening on the website. Tim, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ed. Have a good one.
You also. Also sitting there, evangelicals line up to oppose changes to immigration law. That is sitting there on Newsmax.com. Now, though, let's take a moment, stop down, and talk about another president who went on a visit. That's This American Moment.
His presidency was one of the most vexing in American history. Mention the name Richard Milhous Nixon, and some will always remember him as the president who resigned over Watergate. But many others will credit him with one of the greatest diplomatic achievements, the reestablishment of relations between the United States and the People's Republic of China.
As I have pointed out on a number of occasions over the past 3 years, there can be no stable and enduring peace without the participation of the People's Republic of China and its 750 million people.
For 25 years, diplomatic relations between the two great nations had chilled, following the United States' decision to recognize Taiwan as the legitimate government of China. President Nixon and his then National Security Advisor, Dr. Henry Kissinger, reached out to his communist adversary to change that.
The meeting between the leaders of China and the United States is to seek the normalization of relations between the two countries, and also to exchange views on questions of concern to the two sides.
On February 21st, 1972, President Nixon, along with his wife Pat, arrived in Beijing. He was feted by the Chinese and honored by no less a figure than Chairman Mao himself. Richard Nixon's opening of China to the West has been described as genius, the boldest diplomatic move on the global chessboard in a century. In one stroke, Nixon had separated communist China from the Soviet Union, reducing the power of the communist bloc and paving the way for the eventual end of the Cold War. For Newsmax TV, I'm Bill Curtis, and this is an American Moment.
Meet Mary. She loves to shop online with her debit card. And so does Bill, an identity thief who stole Mary's identity, took over her bank accounts, and stole her hard-earned money. Unfortunately, millions of Americans just like you learn all it may take is a little misplaced information to wreak havoc on your life. This is identity theft, and no one helps stop it better than LifeLock. LifeLock offers the most comprehensive identity theft protection available. If Mary had LifeLock's bank account alerts, she may have been notified before it was too late. LifeLock's credit notification service is on the job 24/7. As soon as they detect a threat to your identity within their network, they will alert you, protecting you before the damage is done. LifeLock has the most comprehensive identity theft protection available, guarding your social security number, your money, your credit, even the equity in your home.
My years as a prosecutor taught me that we all need to protect ourselves from crime. In today's world, that includes identity theft. It's a serious problem. We all have to protect ourselves.
While identity theft can't be completely stopped, no one works harder to protect you than LifeLock. You even get a $1 million service guarantee. That's security no one can beat. You have so much to protect and nothing to lose. when you call LifeLock right now and get 60 days of identity theft protection risk-free. That's right, 60 days risk-free. Use promo code NOTME. Order now and get this document shredder to keep sensitive documents out of the wrong hands. A $29 value, free. Don't wait until you become the next victim. Call 1-800-918-3128 for 60 days of LifeLock identity theft protection risk-free and get a document shredder free. Use promo code NOTME. Call 1-800-918-3128 now.
We, the people of the United States,
in order to form a more perfect union,
establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility,
provide for the common defense,
promote the general welfare,
and secure the blessings of liberty
to ourselves and our posterity.
Do ordain and establish this Constitution
for the United States of America.
My immediate feeling was to kill him, so he will never hurt anybody again.
We don't identify child abuse victims or their relatives to protect the family. So in talking to the victim's father, we're obscuring his likeness, though he believes the face of the accused, 18-year-old Raymond Frolander, is getting too much publicity. The victim's father doesn't regret his reaction after walking in on Frolander allegedly abusing his boy, but he isn't bragging about it either. He is, however, bragging about the victim, his son.
My son saved Raymond. Raymond was motionless on my floor. I went to my kitchen to get a butcher knife. My son stopped me. My son came in front of me and saved his attacker's life.
The father says he treated Frolander like one of his own and says police reports that Frolander was abusing the boy for the last 3 years are wrong. He claims there was an attempt 3 years ago, but then Frolander left town and only recently returned. The victim never told anyone about the attempt, so Dad knew nothing until he witnessed the sexual battery.
Most of us reach a point in our daily lives where we find ourselves frustrated with an inability to do anything about injustice, whether it's specifically aimed at us or society in general. We are by and large good people who believe in the rule of law. But there are times when emotion drives us to take the law into our own hands, exactly what that Central Florida father did when he discovered his child being attacked. And the case is making noise with how local law enforcement reacted. Welcome to MidPoint, criminal defense attorney Daniel Hockheiser. Daniel, always a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Here we go. This one has everybody around the nation talking, I think more so because they have seen Raymond Frolander, the young man here, the 18-year-old young man, and what happened to him after the father took hold of him here. Is it really that shocking, though, that police let the father go?
Well, it is. I think it takes a lot of courage for a police chief to make the decision that this chief made to not pursue criminal charges against the father who severely assaulted this alleged child molester. I mean, the critics will say that the father and this police chief are acting as judge, jury, and executioner without any fact-finding.
Apparently, though, he caught him. Let me go ahead and, for those who have not heard it yet, here is the 911 call that came in from the father that night regarding the young man getting a hold of his son. Listen up. Okay, I'm told we don't have it. It was, I just walked in and found a grown man molesting my son, and I got him in a bloody puddle for you, officer. I want that pedophile gone. He was molesting my son. I walked in, he was out, he had his pants down. I didn't proceed to ask any more questions, sir. Isn't that just like catching someone in the act, though?
It is, but you have to rely on the word of the father and the testimony of the father, which I have no reason to doubt. And I think the police chief's decision not to pursue charges is driven by a sense of fairness and justice. The criminal law generally makes decisions about liability in terms of is the act more like something we would do, the good people, or more like something they would do, the criminals? And this act of beating up a child, a person found molesting your child, seems like a reasonable response to this horrific situation.
Is that the key here, the words you just used, reasonable response, and that is how the legal community and the police will look at something like this?
Well, the legal term of art is justification in terms of whether the father should face charges as to the beating. So probably a cleaner way to dispose of this matter would be to have a grand jury investigation and present evidence to a grand jury and let a grand jury hear testimony and decide whether the father was justified or not in beating up this alleged molester.
That area of Florida has certainly got an awful lot of attention thanks to Stand Your Ground and what's happened in the last couple of years here. That doesn't apply in this case, does it?
No, it doesn't apply, and this is a situation where this is a defense of a third party, not defending yourself. So this father is defending a son who he observes being molested by a man. So practically speaking, in Florida, which is a conservative state by and large, practically speaking, even if you did press charges against the father, there's probably no Florida jury that would convict him.
As an attorney, though, would you not be concerned that something like this sends a message down the line that, of course, we're talking about this was where he caught the individual in the act, but then everything starts to stretch a little bit when things happen in cases like this, and it gets a little further away from the actual epicenter of what happened here? A little bit of a concern, though, I would imagine.
Well, anytime you have vigilante justice, if I may refer to it that way, it's of concern because you have people taking the law into their own hands. In a perfect world, taking emotion out of it, probably what should have happened is the father should have held the attacker, called 911 and waited for the police to handle it, but he didn't, and he apparently beat up this suspect, and we have the results. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the feds move into this to do their own investigation if the Florida authorities don't pursue this.
You're way ahead of me on the question, so I'm not even going to ask. You got the answer right there. About a minute and a half that we have left here. R.J. Reynolds hit with a $23 billion punitive damage award based on a case where an individual died from cigarette smoking. A Pensacola jury awards the widow nearly $24 billion in this lawsuit. This $23 billion, while it really sounds interesting and huge, this isn't going to stand, is it?
I don't expect it to, and I haven't seen any experts or precedent to suggest that it would be sustained by the appellate courts. I think the jury wanted to send a message to big tobacco that they don't like the poison they're selling.
Do you think, though, it'll really make a difference? Because we've seen lawsuits like this before, and we've seen huge, huge damages that are awarded here. Big tobacco doesn't really seem to change much of what they do.
Well, I think this is much like the war on drugs when you're dealing with harder drugs like cocaine and heroin. It's all demand driven. So as long as you have millions of people who are going to buy cigarettes, there are going to be companies that are going to profit from that. And so I agree with you. I don't think it's going to stop.
Although we should point out that the precedent still leaves room for a punitive award of more than $150 million. You think something will come out of this, correct? Some kind of dollar.
Oh, yes, the verdict won't be wiped out entirely, but the court will look at whether the punitive damages are reasonable in light of all the factors. These awards aren't supposed to put a company out of business, and $23.6 billion seems a little far-fetched for a single plaintiff.
We'll see if it sends any message whatsoever, and I'm with you. I sincerely doubt it. Daniel Hochheiser, thanks so much for joining us, Dan. We'll talk to you again. All right, next up, sometimes we say things we wish we hadn't. This comes down to Ron Paul. We'll talk about that and more when MidPoint continues.
Pat Boone here with a word about bank safety. Do you think your money is safe in the bank? Don't bank on it. A generation ago, bank accounts felt secure and they paid interest. This encouraged the virtue of thrift and saving. But today, bank accounts pay virtually nothing, and they've shifted from low risk to high risk. For example, did you know your money deposited in most U.S. banks could be subject to limited withdrawal and even confiscation? Oh yes, and that's just the first of 19 risks explained in a new white paper entitled Don't Bank on It. You still think your bank deposits are safe? You better get this vital new Don't Bank on It white paper now. Call the number on the screen or visit SwissAmerica.com. the gold standard. Learn how simple it is to become your own banker today.
Is your property a jungle choked with overgrown saplings and brush? Take back your land with a DR Field and Brush Mower. Nothing stops the DR. Thick grass and weeds, out-of-control brush, briars, or canes, even 3-inch thick trees are no match for America's favorite brush mower. Lock it in and rip it up. Clear it out, clean it up, and rediscover the land you've lost. And with optional attachments, the self-propelled DR Field and Brush Mower converts into a finish mower, a snow thrower, a portable chipper, or a grater blade. It's a field and brush cutter and so much more.
Call 1-800-456-2023 for a free buyer's guide and DVD. You'll learn how you can try a DR at home for 6 months for as low as $58 a month and get free shipping. Hurry, this offer won't last. Call 1-800-456-2023. Online at drfieldbrush.com.
It happens in the parking lot. When you're parked on the street, it'll even happen in your own garage. A scratch can happen anywhere. And who has hundreds to pay a body shop? Well, now you can keep your money and get rid of expensive scratches easily with Scratchdini, the remarkable all-new professional strength formula that makes surface scratches disappear. It couldn't be easier. Just use a tiny bit of our revolutionary formula, and like magic, you'll buff away the scratch in seconds. Watch again. Just use a little Scratchdini and then literally wipe the scratch away. It's that simple. The magic behind Scratchdini is Carbapol Easy 3 and millions of microparticles that gently and effectively remove surface scratches with one easy step. Best of all, it'll work perfectly with any color finish. Guaranteed. You would never intentionally scratch your car, but look how fast and easy Scratchdini fixes these nasty scratches in seconds. In fact, it's so versatile it works on motorcycles, RVs, boats, and so much more.
Our detail shop can't live without Scratchdini. It's our go-to fix, and it works great.
So forget about paying a collision shop hundreds to sand, paint, and buff out scratches. Call now to get a huge 4-ounce tube of Scratchdini, enough to fix hundreds of scratches for just $10. But wait, order now and get our revolutionary headlight restorer absolutely free. Over time, headlights can get dull and oxidized, making them dim and dangerous. But watch, you can bring back the brightness so they're like new in just seconds. Just look at how much safer and brighter your headlights can be. Amazing! But we're not finished yet. Call right now and you can double the offer. That's right, you get a second set of Scratchdini and Headlight Restorer free. Just pay separate processing and handling. You'll get it all. 2 tubes of Scratchdini and 2 bottles of Headlight Restorer, a huge $35 value, all for only $10. Don't wait. Call now.
To order Scratchdini for $10 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-408-9849, 1-800-408-9849, or order online at Scratchdini.com. Call or log on now.
It's a hell of a pinpoint operation. It's a hell of a pinpoint operation.
Right. It's escalating significantly, and it just underscores the need for ceasefire.
We've got to get over there. Thank you, John. I think, John, we ought to go tonight. I think it's crazy to be sitting around.
Makes no difference whether you're a high-powered politician, the lady who works the cash register at the local store, the president of the United States, the doctor who needs to show a little more concern for patients, the teacher who has about had it being around the little rugrats all day, or a possible presidential candidate for the year 2016. Face it, we all say things we wish we had not said out loud.
The border is secure. Martin Heinrich talked to the caucus today. He's a border state senator. He said he can say without any equivocation, the border is secure.
Like Harry Reid, we often say things that we know are a bit of a stretch, and if it were said in the privacy of friendly conversations, we know how it would be taken. And be honest, we all know he was talking about the border separating Florida and Georgia, and was only getting ahead of the yearly football battle between the Bulldogs and Gators, and noting that everyone would be safe when both sides gather in Jacksonville for the cocktail party. But still, it gets said, once it's out there, there is absolutely no taking it back, no matter what you do.
If an abortion could be considered in a case of, say, a tubal pregnancy or something like that, what about in the case of rape? Should it be legal or not?
Well, you know, people always want to try and make that as one of those things. Well, how do you
slice this particularly tough sort of ethical question. It seems to me, first of all, from what I understand from doctors, that's really rare. If it's a legitimate rape, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down. But let's assume that maybe that didn't work or something. You know, I think there should be some punishment, but the punishment ought to be on the rapist and not attacking the child.
My sainted granny always used to warn me of such verbal dangers. People will judge you by the way that you speak, Edward, she would remind me every chance she got. Later in life, that slice of advice was turned into something much more manly when we talked about those moments where your mouth was moving at 100 miles a minute, yet your brain was not even in gear. This is all about things that we say. Fair to point out that when we are speaking, and when we're trying to make a point, it makes no difference how smart we think we are or how fast on the mental draw we want to gauge ourselves at. We will make mistakes. We're still human after all. And when that brain is racing to try and find the right thing to say, we sometimes trip over a few cells and throw ourselves under the commentary bus. However, when we print something, when we have lots and gobs of time to write something down, look at it again, go get a sandwich, come back, write some more, look at it several times to ensure it's exactly what we want it to say, there can be no doubt it is, at that point, exactly what you meant to say, because if it's not, then you're really not very bright. Ron Paul is not a stupid man, far from it. Yet there are those who believe he needs to rethink what he wrote this weekend on his Ron Paul Institute website. Perhaps he needed to get a second sandwich before committing the words to print. For in commenting about the despicable shoot-down of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, the former presidential candidate became the darling of the Kremlin and found himself being celebrated around the world by those who stand fast in their belief Vladimir Putin had nothing to do with the killing of 298 souls. From his site, just days after the tragic crash of a Malaysian Airlines flight over eastern Ukraine, Western politicians and media joined together to gain the maximum propaganda value from the disaster. It had to be Russia. It had to be Putin, they said. President Obama held a press conference to claim, even before the investigation, that it was pro-Russian rebels in the region who were responsible. The Russians were so impressed he would give Putin the benefit of the doubt, they tweeted his column, accusing the West of propaganda when dictator and former KGB agent Putin's in charge. Fair to note that after a long column, Paul did indicate he might be wrong about everything. Still, in light of this bloody nightmare, one can guess there are a few who would not be willing to applaud him for his assertions and possible sarcasm. Mr. Paul, allow me to quote a very old adage I'm certain you knew long before I was even a glint in my dad's eye. Allow me to add some New Age wisdom to it. If it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, and if there are satellite trails, video, audio transmissions, missing black boxes, drunken pseudo-soldiers rifling through the personal possessions of the dead, and a man who has bankrolled the entire invasion and killing of innocent civilians on the ground and in the air, then it's a duck. And I would be thrilled for you to join me here on MidPoint at any time to explain in depth what you meant to say. For I, like so many others, know you did not mean to stand and support Vladimir Putin. We know that. And that's telling it like it is. We continue right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.
I'm at St. Jude because I had a cancer inside of me. They diagnosed me with a brain tumor. You have to be strong and don't give up. Attitude is everything. You have to fight.
Imagine your doctor tells you your child has cancer with only months to live. Where would you go? What would you do? Who would you turn to? Fortunately, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is fighting every day to save children's lives. And with a gift of just $19 a month, you can join the fight.
This is my kid that they're giving back to me. I am so grateful.
At St. Jude, no family ever receives a bill. In fact, no family pays St. Jude for anything. That's why your gift of $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, is so important.
When I thought that I might lose my son, they gave me hope.
You are not only saving a child's life, you're breathing life back into that family.
If I hadn't come here, I wouldn't have my son.
St. Jude's life-saving research and treatment is shared freely with hospitals around the world.
St. Jude gives you hope and happiness. They're helping us live. maybe in the future, kids won't have to go through this. We'll find a cure and it'll all be over.
Please, call and become a St. Jude Partner in Hope right now.
The words being used here at home to describe the current presidential foreign policy leadership are not in the least bit kind. Cowardly, spineless, ineffective, and even damaging to national security. But what is the perception reality from overseas? The answers might surprise you. In a world where we fear a little more every day for our safety due to things we can control, put on your list something you will have zero control over: the next bioweapon, and what, if anything, we can do about it. And how smart or foolish would it be for Israel to occupy the Gaza Strip? The best chance for peace, or another gaping black hole of political and military mistakes? The only place you'll get honest questions and real answers from every side of the issue, because here we question everything for Tuesday, July 22nd, 2014. For the entire cast and crew, I'm Ed Berliner. Welcome to MidPoint. Also on deck for this hour, one governor has had enough of the inaction from Washington and puts the military to use protecting his borders. How Texas Governor Rick Perry's actions are being received from the local population is the focus of News Call. First, it's John Bachman in this edition of Newsmax Now.
All right, Ed, thanks for that. It's been a major day news-wise for Obamacare, so bear with us. This is going to get a little complicated, but it's very important here. There's been a second appellate court ruling now, and this most recent ruling has ruled that these subsidies we've been talking about for Obamacare are, in fact, legal. The court's judge, Roger Gregory, says the courts should defer interpretation of the Affordable Care Act to the IRS. Earlier today, this was the initial ruling we were reporting out, a different federal appeals court, this one in Washington, D.C., said that those subsidies were illegal, and that would have been a huge blow to Obamacare. That appellate court in Washington, D.C., said the insurance subsidies granted through the federally run health care exchange are illegal. The decision may potentially derail billions of dollars in subsidies for many low and middle income people who bought health insurance coverage through healthcare.gov. The Obama administration says the healthcare subsidies will continue to flow despite the Washington, D.C. appellate court ruling. Again, these dueling opinions may signal that Obamacare is headed once again back to the Supreme Court. Now we turn our attention overseas. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urging the international community to hold Hamas accountable for the latest round of violence. Also in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu telling folks that it is really Hamas's responsibility to accept a peace plan that has been brokered in part by the Egyptians. You see Ban Ki-moon there from the UN. He was saying today that he is optimistic that this latest emergency effort, including John Kerry, will lead to further peace. This is what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to say. All right, we don't have that soundbite ready. We were also taking a look at the issue ongoing in Ukraine. UN Office of Humanitarian Affairs estimates that about 75% of the victims, okay, this is back to the Gaza story, are children, including what's taking place there. Now over to Ukraine. This is impacting travelers here in the United States today. Of course, Delta Airlines, United, and U.S. Air have announced they canceled some flights to Israel today because of safety and security concerns. Delta, which flies between New York's JFK Airport and Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, suspended service indefinitely. A Delta flight with 273 passengers and 17 crew members on board was diverted to Paris today after initial reports of a rocket landing near Tel Aviv's airport. U.S. Airways and United, again, as we mentioned, canceled flights as well. Those flights today, not sure when flights will resume. Delta said the airline is working with the FAA and other government agencies to continue to monitor the situation. More ahead and more news in 30 minutes. Back to Ed.
Do you support reoccupying Gaza?
Well, I support taking whatever action is necessary to stop this insane situation. Just imagine. I mean, imagine what Israel is going through. Imagine that 75% of the U.S. population is under rocket fire, and they have to be in bomb shelters within 60 to 90 seconds. So I'm not just talking about New York, Washington, Chicago, Detroit, San Francisco, Miami, you name it. That's impossible. You can't live like that. So I think we have to restore back a reasonable, sustained quiet and security, and we'll take whatever action is necessary to achieve that.
As Israel and Hamas continue to pound away at each other and casualties mount on both sides of this generations-old war, there is now a subtle hint of the O word being used: occupation. Some think it's the only way to bring at very least, a temporary peace to the Middle East. Others recoil in horror at the very thought of a takeover and the untold terrorism that might unleash. Now let's dog and get some truth here. Welcome to MidPoint. Middle East analyst, blogger for Huffington Post, former prisoner of war, freedom fighter, and award-winning documentary filmmaker Matthew Van Dyke joins us on the show today. Matthew, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Matthew, I want to point out, first of all, a tweet that was sent out by the Israeli Defense Forces yesterday. And as our viewers will see, it is a photo of London with rockets flying over. And this again comes from the Israeli Defense Force. And it comes with the note, Hamas terrorists just fired rockets at southern and central Israel. What if they were attacking your home? In your opinion, has Israel made its world case that they are completely within their rights to do what they are doing and take it as far as they need to protect themselves?
I believe that so far Israel has generally made its case. There's some argument about the level of intensity of the strikes, whether they're precision enough, as John Kerry was caught offhand remarking about. But generally speaking, no country would ever accept thousands of rockets raining down on its citizens by a terrorist organization. And it's important to note that Israel's conflict right now isn't with the Palestinian people, it's with Hamas, a terrorist organization that uses Palestinians as human shields.
But there are those people who would say, hold on a minute, you're right, but the Palestinian people are the ones who put Hamas in power, and they are the ones who are behind them, so they are giving their tacit approval.
It's absolutely true that Palestinians in Gaza elected Hamas, and it remains to be seen in the next election if they will re-elect Hamas. I imagine that given what's currently happening and the blockade on Gaza, that it's unlikely that Palestinians would choose to elect Hamas. But that's also part of the reason why Israel has to be very careful in any negotiations with Hamas now, not to give Hamas any standing to claim a victory in the current conflict that could give them power going into the next election.
Now, we intimated this at the beginning here, but is it not, certainly, if you look at the civilian casualties that are being had here. We talked about it last hour. I'll ask you about it as well. And this comes down to that pinpoint wording that we heard from Secretary of State John Kerry. There are civilians dying. There are people who are eating dinner who are dying. There are missiles flying into hospitals. The Israeli military is a very good military force, though. Is it not somewhat concerning, though, that there are so many civilians dying and so many people that are in civilian settings that are dying?
It's absolutely a concern, and it's tragic that so many people have been killed, and it's not in anyone's interest. It's also not in Israel's interest to have large casualty counts on the Palestinian side. Part of the problem is that Gaza is very densely populated. Israel does make attempts to warn people to leave areas that will be targeted. Hamas, on the other hand, encourages Palestinians to stay in their homes, to stay in the locations. Hamas has said that they intend to break the blockade of Gaza through blood, and they don't mean the blood of Israelis, they mean the blood of their own people. By causing the international outcry against Israel. They want Israel to retaliate. They know that rockets don't do much damage to Israel, but the retaliation causes bloodshed among Palestinians that they can use for propaganda.
You certainly have been on the...
a casualty...
No, please, finish.
Yes? Well, a high casualty count is not in Israel's interest, but it actually is in Hamas's interest for their propaganda purposes.
You certainly have been on the ground before, and now we're hearing, as I mentioned, the O word, the word occupation. Benjamin Netanyahu said it, some of his members of his cabinet have said it, some of his representatives are even hinting it. But there are those who believe that this would just be a tragic mistake, that this would lead to much more bloodshed, and that is not necessary. I'll go to the other side. Some say the only way to shut this down is you have to get in there, you have to ferret this out right from ground level. In your experience and from what you've seen here, is occupation a good idea or simply just another bad mistake?
Occupation would be a disaster. Israel left Gaza many years ago, and I believe that was the correct policy. In fact, from Israel's perspective, it sort of makes their case about whether independent Palestine would be a threat to Israel or not. When they pulled out of Gaza, People elected Hamas, and Hamas started firing rockets at Israel. On the other hand, Israeli occupation doesn't serve the Israeli people very well over time because it's led to just a continuation of the conflict. Israel should probably start withdrawing from the West Bank as well. And if things went the same way in the West Bank that they've gone in Gaza, they'll have to go in and, as the Israelis say, mow the grass, take out the terrorist elements with the minimum loss of civilian life, and try to maintain their security. But the region's always going to be volatile. It's always going to be a problem. And the fact is there's very little that the United States can do about it.
All right, now I'm going to hit right there. You just hit the last couple of words here. Very little the United States can do about it. Would you expand on that, please? Because there are those people sitting here in America and others around the world who say that the government needs to do something. The government needs to get involved. But we also have to preface that with the fact that there are those in the Middle East right now who have told John Kerry, stay home. We don't need you. It's not something that you need to be here for. So are we once again just butting in where we don't belong?
In this case, I believe we are. I believe that the United States generally has a strong role and a leadership role to play, not just in the Middle East, but throughout the world. However, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, time and again, both sides have shown that they could care less what the United States says. A lot of times, our intrusions actually end up causing more damage than good. The current crisis will be solved with negotiations between Egypt, Israel, and Hamas, and they really don't care, any of them, what the United States has to say about it.
Does this not really in many ways come down to, we're talking about this and certainly what's happening in the Ukraine between separatists and nationalists there as well. This comes down to religion at the very core of it. And again, you've had a lot of experience with this. You've been on the ground. You've studied this. You've looked at it. Is it just not fair to say that trying to settle something or trying to bring democracy to an area that is so based on religion is simply just an impossibility?
I'm not sure that's true. You know, Jews and Arabs live together fairly peacefully for quite a long time. They consider each other to be cousins in many parts of the world. You know, sectarianism tends to come up during times of politicalization, as you see currently in Syria. I believe that there is the possibility of coexisting with democratic governments. A lot of the conflict is political. A lot of it does go back to the War of 1967. I wouldn't necessarily chalk it up to an impossibility, but it certainly takes time, and it might take a few more generations before people are able to put their differences aside and actually genuinely pursue a peace settlement here.
I want to turn to the Ukraine here as well, because this comes down, and I mentioned this a little bit, what comes down between the separatists and the nationalists who are sitting there. Is there really any way that you can see of reconciling these two sides? Because there's a proposal out there, at least an idea that's being floated, that Ukraine is completely broken and needs to be separated in two. We can only imagine how disastrous that would be for the region and also for Ukraine itself. So is there really any possible way of reconciling these two sides?
It's completely unacceptable to allow Putin to try to recreate a Russian empire by carving territory off of Eastern European countries. If even a year ago anybody had suggested that Russia would be doing this and at the same time an Islamic caliphate would be established in Iraq and Syria and that the United States would do nothing about it, nobody would have believed it. Yet here we are. You know, the only solution really is the United States should be supporting the Ukrainian government with military aid, with intelligence, with advisement, to help them defeat the separatists, kick Putin back across the border, and end this. You know, this flight would not have been shot down if separatists had not been allowed to operate freely in eastern Ukraine. There really is not going to be any negotiation. Putin feels like the international community will do nothing, and the Obama administration has time and again shown itself to be quite possibly the weakest administration on foreign policy this country's ever had, which only encourages thugs like Putin around the world.
I've got less than 60 seconds to go, but I'm going to make a correlation there between Hamas and Putin. You talk about kicking Putin over to Russia. People talk about kicking Hamas out. But isn't it fair to say that we have two entities here that no matter how much you kick them, they will come back? They do seem to come back. There's got to be a way to hammer them down once and for all, but it simply doesn't seem possible in today's world.
I believe in Russia, if we ratchet up economic sanctions enough that Russians are hurt economically, they will no longer politically support Putin. And also, quite possibly, in Gaza, with the current crisis combined with the blockade, it's possible to erode Hamas's support. The Palestinians will not elect them anymore. Once Hamas fades from power this time, it's quite unlikely they will ever regain power. So it is certainly possible. Since these leaders are elected in both countries, if you ratchet up the economic hardship on people and make the political cost of electing such thugs as your leaders, you know, an unacceptable cost, and they won't continue to make that same mistake.
Still comes down to getting down to the economics and hitting people where it hurts in the wallet, much like Putin and all of his buddies as well. Matt Van Dyke, thanks so much for joining us. Please, let's do it again.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next hour, an exclusive interview with former Vermont Governor Howard Dean. And right after the break, the global perception of the United States, and if we're getting a good idea of our leadership from homegrown critics, what do they really think about us on the other side of the ocean? That and a whole lot more when we continue right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.
Meet Mary. She loves to shop online with her debit card. And so does Bill, an identity thief who stole Mary's identity, took over her bank accounts, and stole her hard-earned money. Unfortunately, millions of Americans just like you learn all it may take is a little misplaced information to wreak havoc on your life. This is identity theft, and no one helps stop it better than LifeLock. LifeLock offers the most comprehensive identity theft protection available. If Mary had LifeLock's bank account alerts, she may have been notified before it was too late. LifeLock's credit notification service is on the job 24/7. As soon as they detect a threat to your identity within their network, they will alert you, protecting you before the damage is done. LifeLock has the most comprehensive identity theft protection available, guarding your social security number, your money, your credit, even the equity in your home.
My years as a prosecutor taught me that we all need to protect ourselves from crime. In today's world, that includes identity theft. It's a serious problem. We all have to protect ourselves.
While identity theft can't be completely stopped, no one works harder to protect you than LifeLock. You even get a $1 million service guarantee. That's security no one can beat. You have so much to protect and nothing to lose when you call LifeLock right now and get 60 days of identity theft protection risk-free. That's right, 60 days risk-free. Use promo code NOTME. Order now and get this document shredder to keep sensitive documents out of the wrong hands. A $29 value, free. Don't wait until you become the next victim. Call 1-800-918-3128 for 60 days of LifeLock identity theft protection risk-free and get a document shredder free. Use promo code NOTME. Call 1-800-918-3128 now.
Now on Newsmax TV. Barack Obama says he wants to fix the border, but what's his real agenda? And who is really behind the children's invasion? Watch The Malsberg Show on Newsmax TV.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is a decline of American leadership around the globe. There's a perception that America is on the retreat from the rest of the world, America that's tired of a decade of war, which I fully understand, an America that decides the fight is just not worth it anymore. And the decline of American leadership around the world is not something that we can't do because it's not good, but it's dangerous, not just to us, but to the rest of the globe.
It doesn't take a lot of searching or time spent listening to hear the critics and pundits in America talk about how this nation is perceived around the globe. Words such as ineffective, cowardly, spineless, and toothless are some of the norm these days. As we're told, we have zero respect around the world thanks in large part to the current administration. But what is the reality? And is it really as bad as some might make us think it is? Let us sally forth then into the international opinion pool. Joining us from Washington, D.C., welcome to MidPoint, Republican strategist Philip Stutz, and the senior Washington correspondent for Talk Radio News Service, Justin Duckham. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here.
All right, I tell you what, Philip, I'm going to go ahead and start out with you. America is in retreat, is what we just heard said. Agree or disagree?
Do I disagree?
Agree or disagree? Is that how we're perceived overseas?
I agree. I think whether you look at the border, which is definitely an international crisis, what's going on in Russia, Ukraine and Malaysia airline incident, if you look at what's going on in Iraq, if you look at what happened in Syria, and frankly, just today, the Turkish prime minister came out and said that the President Obama won't even return his phone calls anymore. My problem with and why I think this has diminished us is because now it is fed into the American press, not just conservative press, mainstream press. Chris Cillizza of the Washington Post has an article out that says, "Are American presidents doomed to fail?" So whether it's our enemies, our friends, or those agnostic overseas, that's what they're reading, that's what they're seeing, and they're seeing those actions from the president, and it has diminished us considerably.
Justin, your turn on this, because there's a lot of people out there who would seem to agree with those sentiments. Do you?
Well, you know, of course, the foreign policy is not perfect, but Pew Research did have a poll coming out this month that showed in about 27 of 43 countries surveyed, there was a net positive rating for Obama. And I think it's sort of ridiculous to say that this tinderbox is sort of his fault. We know that Mad Men exist. We know that Putin has been pulling the strings for quite some time. And the idea that if we had a more ostensibly fearsome leader in charge, would change things is sort of ridiculous on the face of it. We know back in 2008, Putin was more than willing to invade Georgia with a Republican president who was viewed as sort of a hawk by the world. And I just don't think that we'd be seeing much difference if we had sort of a different setup on the American front.
Well, you do have to admit, though, that the president is the one who is in charge right now. So when it comes down to foreign policy and the setting of it, it really does sit at his desk. Come on, the buck stops here sooner or later, doesn't it?
No, it certainly does. And in some regards, he's essentially giving the world community and the people what they want, especially on the home front. We know that a lot of people were sort of sick of the interventionist strategies that we pursued under the Bush administration. That was why a lot of people initially voted for Obama in the first place. That and the view that he could help restore some global prestige. We know it's not at the sort of poor levels that we saw under Bush, even though there was, of course, quite a bit of room for improvement. So I think in that sense, we are not necessarily seeing a strictly successful foreign policy, but it could certainly be a lot worse. So that's a sort of a faint praise, but that's where it stands.
Philip, could it really be any worse?
I don't see how there's faint praise. I mean, Obama whispered to Putin during the 2012 elections, "Let me get through this election cycle, and then we can talk." That's diminished leadership. If you look at the way that President Obama talked during the campaign, that Mitt Romney was talking about, was living back in the 1980s, that's a message that Vladimir Putin sees and takes advantage of, and that's exactly what he's done.
Isn't it sending the wrong message here to the rest of the world with this non-interventionist policy that we have, where you have people like Putin, specifically, because that's what's happening right now, who know that they can take advantage of the situation. And when they take advantage of the situation, then it starts to spread to others as well. Justin, I'm going to go ahead and throw that to you first.
Well, just going back, we know that Putin would take advantage of any situation he was given, regardless of who was in charge. Right now, we have a pretty good foreign policy team established. We've moved away from the Hillary Clinton era and now have somebody who has some real foreign policy bona fides with John Kerry. He's sort of being stretched a little thin, which is unfortunate to say the least. But in terms of what we can really expect, it's not his fault that this tinderbox sort of emerged. We know that these tensions have existed for quite some time, be it with Russia and the Ukraine or the Israelis in Gaza. And so to say that this is purely something that could have been prevented by Obama is just sort of being a little intellectually
Wait a minute, but we can say that it's not his fault. I agree with you there. That's what some people will say. But isn't it the job of the sitting president of the United States in order to take control, be the leader? I think that's the biggest thing that people are talking about here, Justin. They don't see leadership from this president. And every time we talk to anybody overseas, whether it be journalist, individual, representative, they continue to bring up the word leadership. They don't respect the guy, Justin.
Well, how would we really want this leadership to take place? And that's really kind of the question at the end of the day. Americans have spoken out. They say they don't want these sort of scary interventionist policies that we've had for quite some time. And this is pretty much what the result of that is. And this is what American leadership is, for better or worse, going to look like for quite some time until those attitudes shift.
All right. Now, Philip, I'm going to throw it to you when it comes down to leadership here, because what do we want to see? Do we want to see a guy wearing a pair of 6 guns, walking out with a 10-gallon hat on to go ahead and get ready to take everybody to task here? I mean, what is it that the president is missing then?
Sure. I'd say this. Look, if you look at President Obama's response to the Malaysian shooting down of the airline, and then you compare that with Reagan in the 80s, the Korean airline being shot down. It's not. Reagan was very forceful in his speech. He addressed the country, sat down in the Oval Office. He sent a message. And frankly, that's just a micro view of it. The macro view of it is that Reagan always held his ground with people overseas, and Obama seems to retreat or offered veiled threats, and over time that weighs on the international community. They see it, they know there's nothing behind it, and they take advantage of the situation.
Haven't we gotten to a point, gentlemen, where it doesn't make a difference who the president of the United States is right now, but looking at the different factions you have, the terrorists, the dictators, the leaders, if you will, that you can't come out and say something in the first press conference, well, we'll deal with it. The second press conference, well, we'll try to deal with it. But you've got to come out in that first one right now, and you need to let people know where you stand right away, and you've got to be forceful about it. Philip, I'll let you go first.
Listen, we can cut off a lot more on the financial institutions that deal with President Putin and Russia. The European community is not doing that at all. We can do more. The president has that ability to do it. He's not doing it.
All right, Justin, to you.
And I would agree with that. You know, the sort of messaging for this has been pretty far off. It has not necessarily projected strength or comfort to those at home who really care about it. So I will concede that there has been some serious shortcomings when it comes to how we're getting our message across.
All right, now wait a minute. You just said the messaging is off now, so you know how this works here. I'm going to have to jump on that because it seems all of a sudden you have now come over to what you might consider the dark side here, that there is a lack of leadership here. You are willing to admit at least that there is some lack of leadership here in this administration.
No, I mean, look, you're never going to get a necessarily perfect foreign policy. You're never going to have the sort of perfect leader that people have set up. And if you're going to be comparing a sitting president to somebody like Reagan, who is now viewed with rose-colored glasses, you're not necessarily ever going to stand up. So I will say he could be a stronger leader on this. But in terms of where we stand right now, this is a far cry from the sort of dangerous leadership we've seen in the past from presidents who've been willing to sort of flex their muscles in ways that really made the situation quite a bit worse in quite a few instances.
I got about 90 seconds left, and Philip, I'm going to come to you first. Is it not fair to say that if we don't take strong action, if whomever the president is doesn't get right out there and get in front of things, that we make ourselves a greater target for those who are simply looking at us as weak and are looking to kill Americans?
Sure. Listen, this goes back to when Russia first came into Ukraine, and President Obama said, we will not be involved in that international incident. It's not that I wish or any American wishes that we would be involved. It's that you never take your options off the table. And that's leadership. And sure, the president does have his hands tied to a certain extent, but true leadership, all options on the table, certainly sends a message to the international community instead of passive nature of this president. It's been a real detriment to this country.
Justin, 30 seconds, you get the last word.
Well, you also have to build support at home, and by promising that you're not going to send combat troops immediately, you're also shoring up the idea that Americans will support the decision that you ultimately choose to make. So I don't think it's necessarily that big of a criminal offense to take that off the table.
All right, now we're going to have the two of you back again at another time to do this because, Justin, I think perhaps on the other side, Philip may think he scored one there. So we'll have to come back again at another time. We'll give you a chance to come back and do it again. Philip Stutz, Justin Duckham, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here and sharing your opinions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is quite frank to say that you hear what goes on there. There is a thinking process that if America does not put the hammer down right from the very first second, that we see ourselves and the world sees us as being weak. All right, on deck, a word to the wise for those seeking to spend some holiday time in two certain parts of the world. File this one under the common sense portion of the program because certainly if you've been listening and know what's going on in the world, you'll get the drift. The main drift continues right here on MidPoint where we question everything.
Smile.
No matter how well you provide for your family today, if you don't have life insurance, their future may be at risk. Think about what would happen if you were gone. Would they struggle to pay the bills and face an uncertain future? They don't have to. You can help guarantee those you love $200,000, $500,000, $750,000 or more with life insurance through AIG Direct. We'll help you get more for your money, up to 70% more. Just look, less than $14 a month buys a 40-year-old man a $250,000 term life policy. That's up to 3 times what you can get from other companies for the same price. No wonder millions of people rely on AIG companies. The call is free, the quote is free, and there's no obligation. Make the future more secure for those you love. Call now so you can sleep better at night.
For a free quote, call 1-800-558-5246 or visit AIGdirect.com.
Is your property a jungle choked with overgrown saplings and brush? Take back your land with a DR Field and Brush Mower. Nothing stops the DR. Thick grass and weeds, out-of-control brush, briars, or canes, even 3-inch thick trees are no match for America's favorite brush mower. Lock it in and rip it up. Clear it out, clean it up, and rediscover the land you've lost. And with optional attachments, the self-propelled DR Field and Brush Mower converts into a finish mower, a snow thrower, a portable chipper, or a grater blade. It's a field and brush cutter and so much more.
Call 1-800-456-2023 for a free buyer's guide and DVD. You'll learn how you can try a DR at home for 6 months for as low as $58 a month and get free shipping. Hurry, this offer won't last. Call 1-800-456-2023. Online at drfieldbrush.com.
Are you prepared for the coming geopolitical storm that will radically alter the military, political, and economic landscape as we know it? Events unfolding within the next 6 months will have consequences for all Americans and inescapable worldwide economic impact. Langley Intelligence Group Network, LIGNET, is a globally recognized intelligence resource with a senior advisory board consisting of former CIA analysts, national security officers, and presidential advisors. LIGNET's seasoned intelligence and security experts have now issued a global forecast that is must-reading for those who need to be in the know. This in-depth analysis arms individuals, investors, corporations, and governments with the tools to position themselves for success in this rapidly changing environment. Sign up now and access the LIGNET Global Forecast for just $1. Receive 30 days of full access to LIGNET's penetrating global analysis. Join LIGNET today. Go to www.lignet.com/global.
I'm Miranda Khan here again with your latest Newsmax Now update. We've been reporting that Secretary of State John Kerry is over in Cairo in hopes of establishing a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Now, at the latest press conference today, Kerry says he supports Israel defending itself. Kerry's also telling Hamas they need to take the necessary steps to end the conflict in Gaza.
Hamas has a fundamental choice to make, and it is a choice that will have a profound impact for the people of Gaza. For 2 weeks now, we have seen Hamas launch rocket after rocket at Israeli neighborhoods.
Kerry says Hamas should seriously consider the ceasefire agreement brokered by Egypt if they want the Israeli offensive to come to an end. And remember Kerry's comments this past weekend where it sounded like he was criticizing the Israeli military's pinpoint operation? Well, take a look at this video from the IDF, which demonstrates the meaning of a pinpoint strike. What you're seeing right now is an Israeli plane targeting the hideout of a Hamas militant. As you can see, the fighter plane is able to zoom in directly into the unit right there where they believe the target is hiding. In the meantime, Israel is now confirming that one of their soldiers is missing in Gaza. Earlier today, the IDF killed 10 militants disguised as Israeli soldiers when they crossed into Israel through a tunnel. I'm Miranda Khan. That was your latest Newsmax Now update. More coming your way in about 30 minutes.
Those of you who've been there will tell you there's no place in the world quite like Russia. A visit will open your eyes to a very different world, some breathtaking architecture. Israel viewed as one of the most beautiful places on earth. History, passion. However, at this point in our lives, you may wish to reconsider holiday in either part of the world. Welcome to MidPoint, an original news producer for CNN, veteran journalist, traveled the world extensively for more than 20 years, and a nationally recognized travel expert. Couple of minutes now with Laura Powell. Laura, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
Laura, here we go. Delta, United, U.S. Airways now canceled flights out of Israel or to Israel. The FAA has banned airlines going to Israel. Don't even think about it, right?
Well, for the next 24 hours, yes. The ban was put in place about an hour ago at 12:15 Eastern Time. Lufthansa Airlines, which also includes Swiss and Austrian Airlines, has ban travel by their carriers for 2 days in and out of Ben Gurion. So, to be continued. But the U.S. Airlines right now is only a one-day succession of flights.
Is it just not really a good idea for Americans who may want to go and may say, well, maybe I can get away with it? It's just not worth the risk.
I don't think I would go, especially after you read today's travel warning from the State Department, where it says you must be prepared to have a gas mask available. You should know where the nearest emergency shelter is. This is not the kind of place you want to go right now on vacation. So I would definitely say hold off on going to Israel until things calm down.
Might you want to consider also Europe in general when we talk about certain regions? Because now, because of what happened to MH17 over the Ukraine, there are some airlines that are actually flying over Syria, which still seems maddening at that point. You don't want to come close to what's going on there now.
Well, the good thing is, I suppose, if Americans are going over to Europe, they don't have to fly over Syria or Ukraine because obviously Europe is west of that area.
Sure.
So, you can't really check on the flight pattern either. So it's a little bit scary. But again, if you check the travel.state.gov, they will have all of the latest travel warnings, and that's a good place to check if you're going to what might be a hot spot.
But a minute to go. What about Egypt? Because tourism certainly is suffering there, is it not?
It's been suffering a long time, and the difference between what's happening in Israel and Egypt is that in Egypt, a lot of the attacks have targeted tourists directly, and that's why over the last few years, tourism to Egypt has really dried up. Egypt has spent a lot of money boosting their security around the main tourist attractions. And again, there are still travel warnings there, but just this last February, there was another attack on tourists. So unlike in Israel, where it's a general conflict, in Egypt, there's fear of going there because in some cases in the past, tourists have been targeted.
Worry about clothes to take and worry about wars as well. Laura Powell will do it again at a longer period of time next time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And now let's go ahead and take time out for another medical minute to care for your health here in America with Dr. Chauncey Powell.
Judging from everything you hear, you think all cholesterol is bad, but that's not really true. You need a certain amount of cholesterol to maintain good health. The problem is that too much cholesterol in your blood contributes to a plaque, a fatty substance that narrows the coronary arteries that feed blood flow to your heart. Picture your coronary arteries as a 4-lane highway. If one lane becomes blocked, traffic still flows well. 2 lanes, no major problem. But if a 3rd lane becomes blocked, that spells trouble. It's the same way with your coronary arteries. And when plaque slows their blood flow to your heart, this can even cause a heart attack. The good news is that when it comes to cholesterol, lifestyle changes can pay off big time. Even a small reduction in plaque can be like opening up another highway lane. Suddenly, blood flow that was stalled can go forward again. Changing your lifestyle does not have to be hard. And in fact, here are 3 ways to help you start lowering your cholesterol. Snack on nuts. Nuts are probably one of the easiest and tastiest ways to lower cholesterol. Walnuts and almonds are among the best. Bulk up your diet with fiber. Choose whole fruits instead of a fruit juice, brown rice instead of white, and if you're eating a baked potato, be sure to leave the skin on. Choose fish. Fish contains cholesterol-fighting omega-3 fatty acids. I'm Dr. Chauncey Crandall, and thanks for watching this Heart Health Minute. Remember, it's never too late to prevent or reverse heart disease. Right now, I invite you to discover your own risk for heart disease or even a heart attack by taking my quick, free online quiz at www.simplehearttest.com.
When Bob got into the accident, I was terrified. His injuries were so severe, but once we knew he was going to be okay, what then?
I couldn't go back to work for a long time, and we got way behind on our bills.
We'd hired an attorney, but when our case kept dragging on, we didn't know how we were going to get by. Thankfully, our attorney knew about Oasis Legal Finance.
Oasis looked at our case and got us the money the very next day.
What a relief it was. We didn't have to wait until our case settled, and the money from Oasis helped us when we needed it most.
At first I wasn't so sure. What if we lost the case? How would we be able to pay back Oasis? But then I found out if we did lose, we wouldn't have to pay them back, so there was no risk in doing it. No risk.
If you were involved in an accident and hired an attorney to fight for the compensation you deserve but need money now before your case settles, then call Oasis today. Oasis has given millions of dollars to people like you who need money fast while waiting for their case to settle. There's no risk, so call now.
I was hurt badly in a car accident just after my wife gave birth. We were counting on the cash from my lawsuit to get caught up, but the case took forever.
Honestly, we didn't know what we were going to do. Then we saw an Oasis TV commercial and called. We were approved and got money from Oasis the next day.
Not in a week, the very next day.
I was hurt at work and filed a workers' comp claim. I called Oasis and they gave me the cash I needed. Unfortunately, I ended up losing my case, but Oasis let us keep the money. They kept their promise, and we didn't need to pay them back.
There are no out-of-pocket costs and no payments until your case is settled. If you lose your case, you don't have to repay Oasis. There's no risk. Call Oasis now to see how much money you can get before your case settles.
Call now, 1-800-562-8184. 1-800-562-8184. 1-800-562-8184.
35 years ago, fly the Atlantic. Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? We choose to go to the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
From Russian beetles to giant African snails, the U.S. is under assault, and it's costing us billions.
So you guys covered the snails earlier this week.
Right.
We learned that at LAX they intercepted 67 live African snails,
Right. Giant.
which once they've eaten through your garden, they will eat the paint off your house. Those things are so dangerous. And this is the $2 billion figure. That's how much the government spends fighting invasive species. The damage they do is around $120 billion to agriculture, to industry. It is a very serious and growing problem to our economy.
Now, daily we are told of the dangers faced in the world, and certainly here at home, from various forms of terrorism designed to, at the least, disrupt our lives and cause us a small form of grief, or at the very worst, kill us in unimaginable ways that would seem more fitted to Hollywood science fiction. From computer viruses to suicide bombers, the stress level is at new heights, and rarely is there talk of those weapons we cannot see, such as biological warfare and bioweapons. That still simmers under the surface. So does the threat of invasive species doing to America what normal weapons simply will not. Welcome to MidPoint. Associate Professor of Anatomy and Physiology at Labora College in Boston, Dr. Lawrence Roberge joins us today. Doctor, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Great honor and pleasure.
People hear the words $2 billion and they think of, be very serious now, little tiny snails, a moth here and there, little things like that. People just cannot put their brain around the fact that little bugs like this are billion-dollar pests and are causing us such grief.
They're causing us a lot of things, but let me throw out to you those, quote, snails also carry a unique type of rat lung parasite, which would be devastating if just their slime was picked up by human beings. That's why they were handled with gloves. But let's go beyond this. What we're talking about is there are some invasive species that have the potential to destabilize the food productivity and to enhance the disease situation for the United States public health, as well as our agricultural productivity. If one looks at some of the pathogens or some of the introduced species that I'm talking about, such as striga, which is a plant parasite, one could completely destabilize and destroy the corn crop in the United States, thereby having a cascading effect, reducing the food output, reducing the animal feed output, reducing our basically our commodities in exchange, as well as our productivity in biofuels. This is what some of my research was based on, and I base it also on the counter strategies necessary to detect and determine if we are under an invasive species form of biological attack.
Is it simply, though, to the point now, and I base this on a lot of the stories that I have read, a lot of the stories that I have heard, and I also look at one invasive species, which is the Burmese python, that has now fairly taken over the Florida Everglades and is now the top of the food chain there. They continue to have people that they hire to go out there and hunt them down, yet they can't get a handle on it. Have we reached the point where, for a lot of these invasive species you're talking about, we've already lost the war?
We may have lost the war if you think about it from this perspective. For example, the gypsy moth. The gypsy moth was introduced by a knucklehead who thought he was going to try to crossbreed them with silkworms, and they have devastated, going all the way out to the Midwest now. I reside in Massachusetts. That's where it was originally started, and in less than 100 years, it is spread out to such a degree we really have no control. But the problem now is, and you have to understand this, it's not just dropping a species into a non-native territory. It is being able to have the capability to have computer modeling so that we can understand the spread, the impact, and the subsequent destruction. And when we talk about subsequent destruction, as with all biological weapons, you have to look at it from the perspective of agricultural productivity, ecological impact, public health impact, as well as the economic and commodity impact globally. Keep in mind one other thing. We are the United States. We have a much, much more robust amount of resources to manage and do interdiction and to do eradication. In some countries where they don't have the capability, where they have much less variety of foodstuffs, for example, you could destroy an entire country and bring them down without firing a shot.
All right, a couple of minutes I have left here. There are those who are using the phrase, and I never thought I would see this, the phrase weaponization of invasive wildlife by terrorist organizations.
Yes.
There are people right now, I swear, I can see eyes rolling everywhere going, come on, that really can't happen. Can it?
No, it can happen, and we actually have had historical incidents where individuals did this, both when they were doing the medfly conflicts and the medfly eradication efforts in the 1980s. We have had several other cases of this occurring, and our military modelers and military contingency planners, both in the United States Military Department of Defense as well as other areas, have already been doing some planning to see, these things could possibly happen. And what would be the massive impact of this? Could you imagine that suddenly within a season or two, our wheat crops were completely destroyed by wheat stem rust? Could you imagine that we would basically have now new epidemics of diseases? You look at Chikungunya disease, which I just wrote about recently. That's come in. It's now invasive. It's now getting settled in. It's going to become endemic. Many, many people are going to suffer from it.
All right, so about a minute or so that I have left here, we've pretty much scared everybody right now to actually go out of their house or to eat anything that might be grown in America. So what do we do? I mean, where are we now with $2 billion and billions of dollars of food being lost and our lives being threatened? Are we doing anything right now?
There have been efforts. The APHIS, the USDA, has been doing a remarkable amount of work, but they really need to be aware of how this systematized approach is going to be part of the next generation of biowarfare. And we really need to get our heads out of just merely thinking smallpox, anthrax, Ebola, and plague. Because what's going to come down the road is ecosystem destruction as well as eradication of essential resources that we use. These were sometimes theorized in the past, but they have come to fruition today.
About 20 seconds or so that I have left here. Are we underestimating enemies that we think may come after us with conventional weapons but may be planning to do just this?
Yes, very much. And what's sad about it is that I had sent many different copies of documents to many different individuals in the White House. I've gotten better responses, ironically, from Russia Today media sources and Chinese and Iranians, which of course I'm not going to necessarily give them the whole kit and caboodle, but my own government has not paid attention sufficiently. Homeland Security a little bit, FBI a little bit, but they really need to be up to speed, and they are not. And I can tell you right now, the Obama administration, with all the people that they have in the White House, have not really moved on this at all.
Dr. Lawrence Roberge, we'll keep an eye on this. We thank you so much for your time and scaring us all. It's just the way it works. Thank you so much, Doctor. Next on the docket, national outrage at Rick Perry's call for the National Guard. That and so much more when MidPoint continues.
I'll never forget that moment. The moment I realized I was overweight and I needed help. I remember thinking, I don't want to be this anymore. I was 50 pounds overweight. 50. I needed to do something about it. But what? I called Nutrisystem, the best option for me.
Now you can lose weight even faster with a Fast 5 kit from Nutrisystem. Lose 5 pounds your first week or your money back, guaranteed.
I lost 50 pounds on Nutrisystem, and it's completely changed my life for the better.
Order your 28-day My Way plan right now, and we'll rush you the Fast 5 free. You'll get 1 week of fantastic energizing shakes, 1 week of amazing craving crusher shakes, plus 1 week of delicious meals, and it's all free.
Nutrisystem helped me get my life back, and 7 years later, I'm still a believer. Don't wait. Call now and make today the moment when you start looking and feeling great.
Call now, 877-293-SIZE, and lose your first 5 pounds free.
Meet Mary. She loves to shop online with her debit card. And so does Bill, an identity thief who stole Mary's identity, took over her bank accounts, and stole her hard-earned money. Unfortunately, millions of Americans just like you learn all it may take is a little misplaced information to wreak havoc on your life. This is identity theft, and no one helps stop it better than LifeLock. LifeLock offers the most comprehensive identity theft protection available. If Mary had LifeLock's bank account alerts, she may have been notified before it was too late. LifeLock's credit notification service is on the job 24/7. As soon as they detect a threat to your identity within their network, they will alert you, protecting you before the damage is done. LifeLock has the most comprehensive identity theft protection available, guarding your social security number, your money, your credit, even the equity in your home.
My years as a prosecutor taught me that we all need to protect ourselves from crime. In today's world, that includes identity theft. It's a serious problem. We all have to protect ourselves.
While identity theft can't be completely stopped, no one works harder to protect you than LifeLock. You even get a $1 million service guarantee. That's security no one can beat. You have so much to protect and nothing to lose. When you call LifeLock right now and get 60 days of identity theft protection risk-free. That's right, 60 days risk-free. Use promo code NOTME. Order now and get this document shredder to keep sensitive documents out of the wrong hands. A $29 value, free. Don't wait until you become the next victim. Call 1-800-918-3128 for 60 days of LifeLock identity theft protection risk-free and get a document shredder free. Use promo code NOTME. Call 1-800-918-3128 now.
Hi, I'm Mike Reagan. If you think the worst of Obamacare is behind us, think again. Soon its new rules will affect every business, every insured person, and every Medicare recipient. That's why you need to protect yourself, your family, and your business with the Obamacare Survival Guide. It's easy to read, the fastest way for you to understand this law. The Obamacare Survival Guide gives you the tips, loopholes, and strategies you need to know. If you're insured on Medicare, a business, a medical professional, just about anyone, you need to get the Obamacare Survival Guide. It's a #1 New York Times bestseller, and already more than 500,000 Americans have gotten their copy. Newsmax says it's the best guide to the new law. The Obamacare Survival Guide is at bookstores everywhere, or get Newsmax's $4.95 special offer and save $15 off the cover price. Just go online now or call us today.
Texas Governor Rick Perry has had enough. Despite calls to the White House, first pleas, then demands for help in dealing with the flood of illegal immigrants pouring across the border, he finally did what many were calling for, bringing the National Guard to the border to stem the tide. More than a few national pundits rail against the idea of the military being involved. We decided to see what the local reaction was in a special edition of News Call.
Vowing to stem the rising tide of undocumented aliens, women and children streaming across the Texas border right now from Central American countries. Today, Governor Rick Perry announced he's ordering 1,000 Texas National Guardsmen to bolster our security at the border immediately. But unaccompanied women and children are only part of the problem. Perry says an even more dangerous issue is the growing number of criminal aliens illegally crossing the border with them at a time when we don't have the manpower to keep them out.
Drug cartels, human traffickers, individual criminals are exploiting this tragedy for their own criminal opportunities.
While the unaccompanied children from Central America made headlines, Governor Perry says they only make up 20% of illegal immigrants crossing the Rio Grande. A pie chart shows the variety of crimes thousands have committed since 2008, and Perry highlighted a recent North Texas case.
Talked to the sheriff of Parker County, who had a young child molested by a four-time deportee.
Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst also said he's mad, and so are Texans. He believes we should have seen action from Washington before this. On the other side, opponents are characterizing this as a militaristic response. The Texas Democratic Party is criticizing the activation of the National Guard in favor of its own ideas.
What we should do is listen to local sheriffs, work with them, and get the resources that they need. But the reality is these are all short-term solutions and short-term political solutions. What we really need is the long-term fixes.
Republicans across the border states are frustrated. Texas Governor Rick Perry took matters into his own hands today, calling in the Texas National Guard. Here in Arizona, Representative John Kavanaugh said it hasn't come to that yet.
So at this point, I don't believe we need to mobilize the National Guard to the Arizona border.
But Kavanaugh says it has to be an option. Governor Brewer's office said today that mobilizing the Guard is not likely. Brewer has already faced legal battles on that front, and the state is in financial dire straits.
Texas Senator Jose Rodriguez, a Democrat, says the governor, a Republican, is trying to bolster his political future and questions the price tag for mobilizing troops.
I don't think that the state of Texas can afford to spend $12 million a month on National Guard troops along the border because of all the other needs that we have in education, in health care, and economic development issues.
Time and again, the state has proven that when we boost our patrol presence and coordinate around-the-clock efforts with our law enforcement partners on the border, we can substantially obstruct the ability of Mexican cartels and other criminal elements.
But not everyone is on the governor's side.
Well, you know, I think it's really sort of cheap politics. What is the point of putting another 1,000 people on the border? What are they going to do? Push the kids back into the river? It's just an unrealistic way of dealing with the situation. We have a humanitarian crisis.
We're going to start immediate training to run them through any kind of training drills that we anticipate we might encounter in the field.
That training will be for your neighbor, your friend, or any number of people you may run into in Central Texas. Those in the National Guard wait for the call, and that call has come.
We're your Texas brethren. We live next door to you. We work with you. And in times of need, we come to your aid.
But the use of National Guard evokes ideas of military force, and Senator Juan Hinojosa from the Rio Grande Valley says the National Guard is trained to search and destroy, while law enforcement serves and protects. And with young children involved, the difference could be huge.
As we pointed out, the Texas border sheriffs are the one who are criticizing Governor Perry's border plan here. And according to Cameron County Sheriff Omar Lucio telling the Dallas Morning News, I don't know what good they can do. You just can't come out here and be a police officer. But apparently the governor has thought otherwise. The people along the border are the ones who want protection, and there are many who have been wondering why it took so long to bring the National Guard into this fray. We will continue to follow that story. American foreign policy, Ukraine, economics, and what happens next in the Middle East. It's all next hour right here on MidPoint.
Where's your pain?
Right here. Right here. Both elbows.
Take on the pain. Introducing CopperFit. Advanced cutting-edge compression garments designed to help relieve muscle and joint soreness.
Where has this been for the last few years? If I can put this to the rigorous test of an NFL athlete and it can work for me with all the joint pain that I've had, it'll definitely work for you. I pushed this product to the max and it performed great at every level.
Helps reduce swelling for faster recovery.
CopperFit has helped me a lot, and I've seen a huge difference. The pain I was having literally felt like someone was stabbing me in the knees. I pretty much lost all hope. They said you need to quit. It's not going to get better. I refused. To me, I feel really good inside, and I've accomplished something, and CopperFit has helped me do that.
The CopperFit high-performance compression fabric is blended with therapeutic copper, essential to your body. Two technologies combine to help provide support for muscle soreness and aid in recovery and performance, faster recovery, and guaranteed relief of muscle aches and pains.
I definitely recommend it to anybody to give it a try that has pain. I noticed that a couple of days after, it didn't really hurt. And I was like, wait a minute, is this real? This is very real. And just with the copper fit, honestly, for the first week, I've noticed results.
Comfortable, lightweight compression sleeves, tough enough for any active lifestyle.
Construction isn't light duty. I couldn't pick up a gallon of milk. Within a few days of using the copper fit, mobility in my arm was 100% better. It's almost like winning the lottery.
Don't make your body wait another minute. Call 1-800-668-4984 or on the web at getcopperfit.com. Get your choice of one compression elbow sleeve or knee for $19.99. Order now and you'll receive a second sleeve free.
Try the Copper Fit and watch your life change.
Feel the relieving power of copper compression. Feel the power of Copper Fit.
American foreign policy in the Middle East has been and is a disaster. What currently exists in Iran and Iraq is indeed as much as our fault as anyone else's. Now comes time to decide how best to fix it. There is a thinking that economic sanctions are the most effective way to deal with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. But if they come from America alone, would they be enough to make even a minor dent? And could we be facing a disastrous medical emergency in America thanks to our own Center for Disease Control and their seeming haphazard way of working with deadly diseases? Hour 3 of the news program the Alphabet Networks watch to get ideas for their shows. We question everything for Tuesday, July 22nd, 2014. Also, the latest from our sister programs here on the Newsmax TV network and a trip to the Big Apple with Steve Malzberg. All on the dock as we head for this edition of Newsmax Now with John Bachman.
Well, thank you for that, Ed. The Commander-in-Chief is getting ready to oversee a new kind of surge. Of course, we're talking about Texas Governor Rick Perry, who is the Commander-in-Chief of the Lone Star State's National Guard. About 1,000 National Guard troops are on their way to the Mexico border in the southern part of Texas there. Yesterday, Perry said he decided to take this action himself after the feds failed to step up. The troop deployment, though, will cost Texas about $12 million each month.
The price of inaction is too high for Texans to pay. The National Guard troops that I am deploying will support the state-led border surge.
Well, there you have it. Perry is also asking the president for additional support. There's been some questions about how effective this approach could be. The Texas governor wants also the feds to hire some 3,000 additional Border Patrol agents. Meantime, today, the White House announced that officials are getting ready to present new intelligence data and that data could shed more light on the downing of flight MH17. Also today, President Obama spending some time at the Dutch Embassy in Washington, D.C. The president signed a condolence book remembering those who were lost on flight MH17, the flight which was actually downed by Ukrainian rebels, most likely, with Russian Buk missiles departed from Amsterdam en route to Malaysia. The president saying that he wants to assure the Dutch people that they are going to investigate the situation, make sure justice is done. Also today, the Dutch foreign minister, while at an emergency meeting of EU officials in Brussels, said the European Union is unleashing a new round of sanctions against Russian officials linked to the involvement or to the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. Earlier today, pro-Russian separatists also released a train packed with bodies of plane crash victims. Russian rebels also handed over the flight's data recorders to Malaysian officials 4 days after, though, the flight was shot down. But some investigators who have taken a look at the plane say there is no way, based on what they've seen, that the rebels did not tamper with those black boxes. More news ahead in 30 minutes. I'm John Bachman. Now here's Ed Berliner with the rest of MidPoint.
8-year-old Manine says she cries each time she thinks of her father, continuously rubbing her eyes as we speak, though her tears no longer fall, showing us old photos. She was Daddy's favorite, the youngest of her 8 siblings, but the toughest of the girls. He told me, take care of your sisters, she remembers, and don't go out because of the explosions. That was the last time she heard his voice, the evening before he was killed in battle. Her father, Ali Al-Tabi, was 50 years old, a sniper in the Iraq-Iran war.
There was a time, and the summit was not so long ago, when America was the leader in global affairs, when America was trusted to do the right thing, and when the president was considered to be something much more than an elected leader, but one who truly had the world's rapt attention for being there to make the right call at the right time. Those times, if one listens to the various pundits, are now consigned to the dustbin of ancient history, especially when it comes to Iran, Iraq, the Middle East in general, and other flashpoints around the globe. Let's welcome back to MidPoint Chief Analyst for LIGNET, the Langley Intelligence Group Network, former member of the CIA, Fred Fleitz, joins us today on MidPoint. Fred, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Ed. Good to be here.
Fred, it seems to have been lost a little bit in everything that has happened with MH17, with what's going on in Israel right now and the conflict with Hamas. We have not paid a tremendous amount of attention lately to Iraq and Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. It would seem as if that he is still flying under the radar, and to most people it would seem that something still has not been done, and that is still a volatile issue that we as Americans and the world itself seems to have almost forgotten.
I think that's exactly right. It seems difficult for American officials and the American news media to deal with too many simultaneous catastrophes and calamities. Under the situation in Iraq, they are unable to select a new prime minister, which means Maliki could remain in office for months, maybe a year. He is so destabilizing, he is so hating Sunnis. This is simply going to drive this conflict.
Does it simply come down to the Sunni issue with him, or is there something else that we're missing when it comes to al-Maliki?
It's the Sunni issue, and it is his tendency to set himself up as an autocratic leader, to not listen to others and to move in an anti-democratic fashion. And that's really what's driving the alienation towards him by non-Shiites.
Is it fair to say that at this point in his career, if you will, that he is really nothing more than a puppet for Iran?
I think he has a strong relationship with Iran. I'm not prepared to say he is a puppet of Iran just yet, but as this conflict worsens, and given the likelihood he may be in office longer, he will become more and more reliant on Iran, and maybe in a few months from now, all experts will agree that he is indeed an Iranian puppet.
When we talk about replacements here, are there any real candidates? Because I love it when we get into elections and we talk about people who may replace him, but we never hear any names. Of course, it would seem as if these are phantom candidates, to say the least, or phantom replacements.
There is no candidate. He has to be replaced by a Shiite under the power sharing agreement. The prime minister has to be a Shiite. And there isn't a Shiite candidate who seems to be capable of getting more. One candidate who's been mentioned is Ahmad Chalabi, the controversial Iraqi leader who has been accused of putting forward false information concerning the Iraq War in 2003. He has some substantial support, but he doesn't have nearly enough support to overcome Maliki. And I think Iraqi Shiite political officials realize that Chalabi becoming the prime minister of Iraq would be extremely unpopular in the West and would probably cost Iraq on the world stage.
Has anything happened in the last couple of weeks? And again, I like to bring it to that because it almost seems months since the last time we actually talked about Iraq and we focused on it with everything that's happening here around the world right now. But the last time we really dug into it, and the news media did, we were talking about whether or not we would be able to offer them any help. Could they hold off Baghdad? What was ISIS doing? How close were they getting? How close were they to actually creating that state and basically taking over permanently that large part of Iraq? Has anything really changed, or better put, has anything gotten better for the Iraqis to try and hold on to their own country?
Well, the reason we haven't heard much is that the instability in Iraq has become the status quo, and the media has become uninterested in it. It's still extremely unstable, and ISIS is making gains and consolidating its position. There are those who said that ISIS may try to take Baghdad. I never agreed with that. Baghdad is a Shiite city. These ISIS rebels would be eliminated if they try to attack the city, and I don't think that ever was in the cards. ISIS is trying to cut off supply lines to Baghdad and communication lines to other areas of the country. I think the Iraqi government has made some small progress against ISIS over the last couple of weeks, but ISIS is still a formidable force, and not much has been done to dislodge it from the territory it currently controls.
I want to talk about ISIS here for a second, because the latest that we hear is the Christians have been forced out in Mosul, and ISIS is now basically threatening their lives, and every Christian pretty much has left. Are we missing here what is the humanitarian/religious issue here that is going on, and what is a heinous destruction of a culture that has lasted in that part of the world for centuries?
This is a terribly underreported story of how Christians in the Middle East have been under fire over the past 20 years. These Christians are ancient. They've been there for, up to 2,000 years. And ISIS is now pushing them to convert to Islam or be killed. They're being driven from their homes. As they leave their homes, their possessions are being stripped from them from ISIS rebels. And I don't know that they're being killed yet, but I think that's something that we should be very worried about. This is a consequence of this fanatic Islamic group gaining power in Iraq.
Have we hit it now to the point with ISIS where they are pretty much sitting still? I agree with you. I don't think ISIS ever had any idea or any real concept to take Baghdad. They didn't have to take Baghdad in order to make their point. So are they now pretty much in the phrase hunkered down, sitting, waiting, and now they'll try to work with the land that they have at this point to create some sort of deal, if you will?
I don't think ISIS will ever deal. I think ISIS is consolidating in its position and continually to spread the amount of territory that it controls. And I think it has very ambitious goals. It has threatened terrorism in Jordan. I believe it has its eyes on Israel and Lebanon. And it is also working in Syria to undermine the Assad government. So I don't think ISIS is going to sit still.
Will we ever understand that, and Fred, every discussion that we have, every time I discuss this, every time we have any sort of an expert on, I always come down to this. And the answer really has never changed, but I ask you because you're the expert. Have we as a people and a government finally gotten to the point where we will understand that it is Islamic extremism or the highway in some areas of the world, specifically in that area of the world? We can crow, we can make plans, we can get involved, we can throw money at it, whatever we want, but at the end of the day, whether it's now, 2 weeks, 2 years, or 2 decades down the road, it is still going to come down to Islamic extremism.
Well, I would call it Islamist extremism, just as the way I see it. I think American leaders have to realize that this is a serious threat, and it can be, we can combat it. The problem with this administration is that they've been very reluctant to criticize radical Islam. They've been reluctant to use the word terrorism. I don't think they've ever used the word radical Islam. And I think this has created an opening for these extremists to spread their ideology. Western states have to stand firm against this ideology, and we have to stand with moderate Muslims to defend themselves and to oust these people.
I wanted to make sure that we brought Iran into the picture here, because I did talk about that a little bit at the beginning here. We know what we're talking about here with al-Maliki and what has happened there. I mentioned Iran a couple of minutes ago here. Does this pretty much, though, in many ways, if something doesn't happen, if there is not some sort of stable government there, at least within the next year or two, maybe less, that we have handed Iraq to Iran basically on a silver platter?
Well, there are some who argue we should stay out of this conflict and let these various parties kill each other because they're all anti-American. ISIS is anti-American, Iran is anti-American, Iran hates ISIS. I think an unstable Iraq actually is not in Iran's interest because it gives rise to a radical Sunni terrorist group which is very much against Shiite Iran. Iran wants a stable Shiite government. Iran would like Maliki to stay if possible. If Maliki can't stay, Iran will probably try to install Chalabi as the prime minister of Iraq. But I don't think an unstable government in Iraq is handing the country to Iran.
Fred, we always talk about the United States getting involved. Is there any appetite for others to get involved? Certainly, we always talk about how many times it seems America is involved in certain areas, and the European Union, other countries there, simply put their hands up and they walk away and say, we don't want to get involved. So is there any reason to believe that as we move forward here, have we gotten anywhere with getting other countries to want to get involved and help settle this, or are they just as hands-off as always?
I think there really is intervention fatigue, by European states who joined us in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I can't see any states that are prepared to make a big commitment in Iraq. I think there's a possibility if the Shiite government starts including the Sunni minority in the running of the country, that the United States and its allies will be able to start providing increased training and military support to the Iraqi government. But I think we're still waiting to see that happen.
About 20 seconds I have left. Do you see anything happening with the United States here in the near future, next few weeks, few months, anything significant?
I think we're going to see the U.S. continue to provide military training and support at a fairly low level. We're going to be pressing Maliki to leave office very subtly, and we're just going to wait and see. The Iraqi parliament is going to meet again, and they're going to try to agree on a new prime minister.
Subtle never seems to work with some people, Fred, no matter how many times we think that it will. Fred Flight's always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for joining us. And a reminder, for in-depth analysis and forecasting on Iraq, Israel, or other geopolitical issues, make sure you go to lignet.com, lignet.com. Check them out on a daily basis. We do here, right here, every single day. Coming up next, more of MidPoint, the show that questions everything.
Are you suffering from lower back pain?
Do you wake up with nagging aches and stiffness? Now you can stop suffering and relieve your pain with ChiroBack,
The drug-free in-home treatment for back pain.
All it takes is just 10 minutes of soothing treatment from the comfort of your own bed, couch, or floor.
It's like having your own personal chiropractor right in your home.
I use my hands in the office to provide passive motion to the spine of somebody who's experiencing pain. And that passive motion is replicated by the ChiroBack.
It's like having this personal chiropractor do the motion that I'm used to when I go to a chiropractor.
If you can lie down to rest, you can get rid of back pain with ChiroBack. It's that easy.
All it takes is 10 minutes a day.
Like magic. It opens the whole spine up and you're free again.
The secret is ChiroBack's proprietary technology.
A fusion of oscillation therapy and continuous passive motion.
The unique motion gently releases the pressure between the vertebrae, allowing your spine to open up and decompress.
It's amazing how much tension it can release in so short a time. 10 minutes? That's amazing to me.
ChiroBack is clinically proven to provide long-lasting relief.
In fact, ChiroBack was proven 200% more effective than inversion therapy. It even proved more effective in relieving lower back pain than exercise.
Call now and try ChiroBack risk-free for not 30 days, but 60 days with our triple guarantee. If ChiroBack does not relieve your back pain, return it and we'll refund the purchase price, refund the shipping charge, and even pay the return postage.
So give ChiroBack a try today. ChiroBack, relief at last.
Visit trychiro.com right now or call 1-800-334-9816 for your risk-free trial. That's 1-800-334-9816. Call now.
Now on Newsmax TV, Barack Obama says he wants to fix the border. But what's his real agenda? And who is really behind the children's invasion? Watch The Malzberg Show on Newsmax TV.
If the job of the president was merely to avoid catastrophe, congratulations. But I don't think that's what the only job of the president in attempting to steward an economic recovery is. And so whether you judge it a failure or success, or whether you judge some of the predictions by Republicans to be a failure or success, is something that historians can look at. But what we know is what has hit us today, which is that a large number of our citizens in my state and across the country are unimpressed with this recovery and the effect it's had on their lives.
While we in America hear words such as economic recovery bandied about daily without so much meat behind it, talk of dollars also begs our turn to the east and what, if any, good economic sanctions against Russia will do in the wake of Malaysia Flight 17. Let's welcome to MidPoint the editor of Power Trend Profits, Forbes contributor and noted economist Chris Versace joins us today. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, so happy to be here, Ed. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Chris, we're going to start out overseas, first of all, because as always happens, something catches my eye immediately when I'm looking at different stories. This one immediately caught my attention. Russia's billionaire businessmen are horrified at the prospect of crippling economic sanctions in response to Moscow's involvement in Ukraine, but are too terrified of President Vladimir Putin to say so openly. You agree with that?
Well, it's really interesting, Ed. When you look at the Russian economy and where these guys are making their money, oil, gas, over into Europe, big dollars are at stake, and I think they're very much afraid of losing that economic incentive that makes them, of course, millionaires and billionaires. But at the same time, Putin is showing that he is ruling with an iron fist, and I think that yes, they are very hesitant. But I do think that profits and prosperity will rule out on this, Ed, and that, as we're starting to see, things are starting to come together, and I wouldn't be surprised if we might have some sanctions, but we're not going to go to phase 3. We're starting to see the investigation open up a little bit when it comes to the Malaysian aircraft that was shot down. And I think before too long, the stock market and everything else will begin to look past this and see this as a one-time event.
Well, is it not fair to say, though, that these people certainly can be upset? Because here's one, OAO Novatech. It's a gas producer partly owned by one of Putin's allies. Their market value was cut by almost $3 billion after they were barred from using U.S. debt markets for new financing with maturities longer than 90 days. Okay, take the economics out of this for a sec. $3 billion, they're hit. But is it not fair to say that Vladimir Putin, he also gains an awful lot here? He's also involved in this. It is going to hit his pocket one way or another, because it's not as if these owners of the gas companies, Gazprom, Novatech, are the only ones making money, correct?
No, that's absolutely true, Ed. It's kind of the old boy network over in Russia, if you want to think of it that way. Who knows who is on whose board, who's being compensated by who. So yes, if part of Putin's allies and friends and business partners are feeling the heat, you can rest assured that he is too. So there is some, you may not want to talk economics like you and I think about it in terms of global economies, but in terms of the personal pocketbook, he's being hit.
So let's look at what the EU is going to do here, because I've always said that they have to be involved as much as anybody else. We need help from them, certainly on the economic side of things, that they're planning to expand their list of Russian officials, businessmen, and entities under asset freezes and travel bans. Chris, honestly, boil this down for us here. Is any of this, where we're at right now, what we know these sanctions could be, going to make any difference to push the Russians, or do we still have to go further?
Well, it's a very tricky line, Ed, and I say that because we know right now during the summer, oil, gas demands by the European Union are not as robust as they will be several months from now. And where do they get the vast majority of their oil and gas? From Russia. So it's kind of poking the bear, no pun intended, of saying, watch out, you be careful, full well knowing that in several months' time, they will need Russia as a source of energy. So I think it's a very tricky line, and it's one that's going to have to find some balance.
Do you think, though, that the Germans, the French especially, and the others who are on the other ends of pipelines and economic deals are as mortified as Americans are by seeing bodies piling up in a field in the Ukraine, that they are willing basically to say, all right, look, we need to chuck our fuel prices here for a while. We need to basically fend for ourselves, and we've got to say something to the Russians. I got to tell you, Chris, honestly, there's a lot of people around the world who don't see that happening.
Well, I think anytime you see bodies piling up, I think it paints a pretty morbid picture. And I think people start to wonder what could or could not happen. But at the end of the day, I do think that, dollars, not the U.S. dollar, but dollars and profits are going to rule. And I think we're going to see that continue.
So you do think that the Europeans will get involved or will get on board somewhere here in some sort of sanctions? I mean, meaningful sanctions.
Yes, I would be surprised if they don't. The real question, Ed, is do we go to phase 3 sanctions or not? That's the big differentiator. I do see us ratcheting up sanctions, but again, going to phase 3 could have some repercussions later in the year.
All right, now phase 3, that basically is entire economic sectors, defense, energy. That could damage the Russian economy. Is that something that if America pulls the trigger on those level 3s, with or without Europe, that it could put the Russian economy straight into a recession?
Well, it will certainly, challenge the Russian economy. When you look at us as a trading partner, we're not one of the biggest ones for Russia by far. China, Western Europe, Canada, Mexico are far bigger partners for ourselves. I do think for that to significantly happen, we would need to see the EU get on board for that. But let's be honest here. If we continue to restrict or even amp up the restriction on Russia to the credit markets, the global stock markets, and the like, yes, we will put a serious hurting on their economy.
Germany is the one right here that comes to mind right away, the biggest economy in Europe right now. Angela Merkel has been talking to Putin as well. And on the other side, you have China, who is also looking to potentially do some deals with the Russians as well. They're involved. They're in bed together. Do you think we're getting to a place where the Chinese may even want to say, this is getting a little dicey here. We may even want to back out because it doesn't make us look good, or do the Chinese simply not care?
And the Chinese are a tough one to kind of figure out sometimes, and I think this falls into that camp. I think that as they become more of a world power, I think it behooves them to sit back and say, what's the proper thing to do here? But that doesn't mean that they're going to.
All right, I want to go ahead and spin to disposable income here, which is fascinating here. There's so many numbers out here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's so many different graphs that are out here right now. We could spend a week and a half here looking at graphs, but I think let's go ahead and talk about it. There's a discussion factor here that said disposable income simply is not what it used to be, and Americans need to understand that. And I'm even looking at an article right here that says it is called the rot, R-O-T, the rot of the U.S. economy. Give us a little bit of a background here.
Well, Ed, when I look at the various sectors to invest in, whether it's in the thematic growth portfolio that I run or in my investment newsletter, Powertrain Profits, the consumer is a key driver of what's going on. And you have to understand how a consumer is able to spend. You get your paycheck, you pay your taxes, hopefully, and you have certain fixed costs that you take out, your mortgage, your car payment, your utility bills, and what's left over, Ed, is what really is the economic engine. That is the disposable income. Money you can spend on clothes, go out to eat, that sort of thing, go to the movies, buy presents, buy books, that whole kit and caboodle. So for me, it's a very, very important economic indicator. And I have to be honest with you, Ed, over the last several months, as we've seen food prices climb, the entire protein complex is just ratcheted up. We take a look at gas prices. Those have, climbed as well. Now we're seeing a number of different companies pass through price increases. Everybody from McDonald's, Sonic, Chipotle, Starbucks, and just last week, the Hershey Company put through an 8% across-the-board price hike. So when we put all this together and we look at the state of the jobs being created, more part-time, more skewed towards lower wages, it's a little concerning for me about the consumer in the back half of the year with the all-important back-to-school spending season and, of course, the holiday shopping season.
About a minute or so left, and I wanted to get right to that statement here, and I wanted to get your opinion on this as well. I want to finish the one I started. It says, no matter how hard they try, Americans, the American government will realize that no amount of money printing can cleanse the rot of the U.S. economy. Would you agree with that and the thinking behind that?
I absolutely agree with that. What are we doing? We're keeping interest rates artificially low. At some point, and I think this is the big risk, Ed, in the back half of the year, that we've kept rates so low, and the expectation is they will remain so low that we could get blindsided by a real push in inflation. That's my biggest concern, because then all of a sudden the Fed might have to catch up and tighten faster than expected. Right now, the first hike for interest rates is expected sometime in the first half of 2015. Could it come higher? It could, and I think that could really, really have a ripple effect that hurts us. What will it do to housing, a rate hike? Probably hurt it.
About 15 seconds. Is there anything the government can do at this point other than printing money in order to try and stave this off?
Well, I think they should, do what they were founded to do, which is, minimal government and get out of the way.
Minimal government, get out of the way. Wait a minute, hold it. I don't see that anywhere in any of the plans for anybody in Washington right now, Chris. Really?
That's right.
What's wrong with you, Chris? It's not sitting there anywhere. You have to be a little bit more realistic, man. Get with the way the government works.
Well, you asked what they should do. I'm telling you.
I'm with you all the way. I just wish somebody else would be hearing it. Somebody inside the Beltway would be nice as well. Chris Versace, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much. We'll do it again.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, there's your economic reality for the day, if you will. Later in the hour, how much real danger are Americans being placed in by their own government, specifically the Center for Disease Control? Weren't these the guys that were supposed to take care of us and also make sure that we never got sick? There's a real problem here brewing. We'll talk about it when MidPoint continues on the Newsmax TV network.
Are you feeling tired, run down, low on energy? Well, you could be just like millions of Americans whose thyroid gland isn't functioning the way it's supposed to. Well, now there's hope to change all of that. Introducing Actilin. Actilin is a premium nutritional supplement designed to support optimal thyroid function. Actilin has 17 powerful ingredients that support adrenal health, thyroid function, energy, and your immune system. Actilin was formulated by the renowned holistic practitioner, Dr. David Brownstein. And now, for a limited time, you can get a free bottle of Actilin with our special offer. You pay only for shipping and handling. Act right now and get Dr. Brownstein's free special report, A Doctor's Guide to a Healthy Thyroid. Get Actilin and the special report. Sign up today at getactilin.com. That's getactilin.com. Or call us at the number below.
Meet Mary. She loves to shop online with her debit card. And so does Bill, an identity thief who stole Mary's identity, took over her bank accounts, and stole her hard-earned money. Unfortunately, millions of Americans just like you learn all it may take is a little misplaced information to wreak havoc on your life. This is identity theft, and no one helps stop it better than LifeLock. LifeLock offers the most comprehensive identity theft protection available. If Mary had LifeLock's bank account alerts, she may have been notified before it was too late. LifeLock's credit notification service is on the job 24/7. As soon as they detect a threat to your identity within their network, they will alert you, protecting you before the damage is done. LifeLock has the most comprehensive identity theft protection available, guarding your social security number, your money, your credit, even the equity in your home.
My years as a prosecutor taught me that we all need to protect ourselves from crime. In today's world, that includes identity theft. It's a serious problem. We all have to protect ourselves.
While identity theft can't be completely stopped, no one works harder to protect you than LifeLock. You even get a $1 million service guarantee. That's security no one can beat. You have so much to protect and nothing to lose when you call LifeLock right now and get 60 days of identity theft protection risk-free. That's right, 60 days risk-free. Use promo code NOTME. Order now and get this document shredder to keep sensitive documents out of the wrong hands. A $29 value, free. Don't wait until you become the next victim. Call 1-800-918-3128 for 60 days of LifeLock identity theft protection risk-free and get a document shredder free. Use promo code NOTME. Call 1-800-918-3128 now.
I'm Miranda Kahn here again with another Newsmax Now update. The Federal Aviation Administration has now banned all U.S. flights in and out of Israel, citing security and safety concerns. The grounding of flights is expected to last at least 24 hours. Meanwhile, European airlines such as Air France and Lufthansa have also followed suit by suspending all of their flights into Tel Aviv. Israel, and specifically a new ceasefire plan, remains a top priority for U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Kerry met with Egypt's president today. The two are working towards a way to end the fighting between Israel and Hamas. Egypt originally proposed a ceasefire plan backed by the U.S. and Israel, but it was rejected by Hamas. Kerry is now pressing Palestinian leaders to accept that deal. U.S. officials say Kerry may also visit Israel during his Mideast trip. Some say U.S.-Israeli relations have been awkward following Kerry's comments about the IDF's pinpoint military operations. We'll, of course, continue to monitor the situation in Israel and bring you the very latest details as they become available. I'm Miranda Kahn, and that was your Newsmax Now update.
Let's bring you up to speed on some of the stuff that's been going on our sister shows. On the Steve Malzberg Show yesterday, of course, the Steve Malzberg Show follows us every day at 3 o'clock right here on the Newsmax TV network. Matthew Continetti, the contributing editor at the Weekly Standard, said that President Obama has to go through procedure, regardless of how obvious it may or may not be, to make sure that Russia played a large part in the downing of Flight MH17. And when that investigation is finally over, the administration likely, according to him, won't even know what to do.
It's just not in Obama's nature to be swift in reacting to world events. There's always an investigation, there's always a procedure, and there's always incremental steps taken in response to our adversaries. So you saw Obama greet the basically invasion of Ukraine with a series of sanctions. Just last week, he stepped up those sanctions. In fact, he did that the day before the Malaysian air flight was shot down. So what's he going to do when his investigation proves, as we all suspect, that the Russians are behind the insurgents who shot down the plane? More sanctions? I really don't know. I feel like he's reaching the point of diminishing returns with this current policy in Russia, and I'm not sure the White House knows what to do next.
Let's remind everybody of the schedule right here on the Newsmax TV network, 9 o'clock Eastern Time every day, Monday through Friday. It's not every day, but it's Monday through Friday. 9 to noon, America's Forum. J.D. Hayworth is in the chair. Steve Molsberg, 3 to 6 o'clock. That's Eastern Time, and we're right in the middle with MidPoint from noon to 3 every Monday through Friday right here. I want to bring you up to speed, too, on some really distressing news and certainly adding some more to what's happening with the MH17 case. And these are from several reports coming in now from the Ukraine. International monitors finally gaining access to the crash site. They say that the cockpit of the Boeing 777 has been sawed in half. They saw large parts of the cockpit. Every part of the fuselage, according to the investigators, had been carried off. They said they are not sure why such vital pieces of evidence from the down plane were tampered with. The separatists, of course, still deny shooting down the plane. The cockpit, and I'm reading once again here from certain reports, a number of reports actually, the cockpit of the Boeing 777 was found in a section of the crash site that had been immediately cordoned off during the first 2 days after the plane went down. Witnesses tell USA Today that this was also the area where the first bodies were removed. The cockpit apparently was cut in half with diesel-powered saws. Pieces missing. The investigation will no doubt be much more difficult. Now let's take a moment right here on the Newsmax TV network for another American moment.
Since the beginning annals of history, the Middle East has always been a center for conflicts, intrigue, and war. So it was again on August 2nd, 1990, when Iraq's then-President Saddam Hussein ordered his armies to invade Kuwait. His objective? The oil-rich fields of Rumalia. It took 5 months of failed negotiations before the United States and its European and Arab allies abandoned their diplomatic efforts and initiated military actions against the invading Iraqi forces. On the evening of January 16, 1991, President George Herbert Walker Bush addressed the nation.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak.
The largest Allied coalition since World War II was amassed under the command of General Norman Schwarzkopf. Known as Stormin' Norman, he led over 500,000 troops with military forces primarily from the United States, Britain, and Saudi Arabia, along with logistical and financial support from an additional 31 nations. President Bush was quick to make known the Allies' clear and limited objectives. Known to history as either the Persian Gulf War or First Gulf War, it marked the beginning of frontline reporting by embedded news reporters from around the world, providing their viewers with live pictures of ongoing battlefield actions. Anticipating the Arab nations opposing him would refuse to fight alongside their archenemy, the Israelis, Hussein launched Scud missile attacks against Israel, hoping to draw them into the conflict. But the U.S. quickly deployed to Israel the new Patriot missile interceptors, which for the first time were used successfully on the battlefield. In the end, Israel stood back. Within 100 hours of the ground forces launching their assault, the war was over. But not before Saddam Hussein had ordered the destruction of the very oil fields he sought. 1 week following the cessation of fighting, President George Herbert Walker Bush addresses Congress and the nation.
As president, I can report to the nation, aggression is defeated, the war is over.
For Newsmax TV, I'm Bill Curtis, and this is an American moment.
Smile!
No matter how well you provide for your family today, if you don't have life insurance, their future may be at risk. Think about what would happen if you were gone. Would they struggle to pay the bills and face an uncertain future? They don't have to. You can help guarantee those you love $200,000, $500,000, $750,000 or more with life insurance through AIG Direct. We'll help you get more for your money, up to 70% more. Just look, less than $14 a month buys a 40-year-old man a $250,000 term life policy. That's up to 3 times what you can get from other companies for the same price. No wonder millions of people rely on AIG companies. The call is free, the quote is free, and there's no obligation. Make the future more secure for those you love. Call now so you can sleep better at night.
For a free quote, call 1-800-558-5246 or visit AIGdirect.com.
This is a national healthcare alert from the Health Hotline. If you, a family member, or a loved one suffers from knee pain and have Medicare as your primary insurance, we've got great news. You could qualify for a pain-relieving knee brace at little or no cost to you. Get free delivery, and all the paperwork is handled by our accredited suppliers at no charge to you. If you are on Medicare and have knee pain, don't wait. You may qualify to immediately receive a pain-relieving brace at little or no cost. Call the Health Hotline right now for details toll-free at 877-530-9847. Friendly agents are standing by 24/7 to help you. We also have other pain-relieving braces available for shoulder, ankle, and your back. You may be eligible to receive these items and more at little or no cost to you as well. Call right now for details toll-free at 877-530-9847. Please remember this number, 877-530-9847. Our friendly representatives are standing by now to take your call. Please call us right now at 877-530-9847.
Hi, I'm Jean, and this is my one and only Henry. We just love scouring flea markets for special treasures. But with my type 2 diabetes, we now spend all the time at the pharmacy. With Medcare, I don't have to. They deliver everything I need right to my door with free shipping. Plus, Medcare takes private policies, Medicaid, even my Medicare. Sleep apnea machines, nebulizers. Medcare has all the finest medical supplies. The best part, Medcare saves us money. Medcare allows us the time to do the things we love. Medcare, we deliver a better life.
Our laboratories are core to our ability to protect Americans. Our laboratories are the reason we are the gold standard for not just infectious diseases, but environmental health as well. And for this to happen and put our workers potentially at risk is totally unacceptable. So I'm upset, I'm angry, I've lost sleep over it, and I'm working around the clock to make sure we do everything possible to resolve it.
On its surface, the revelations are more than a little alarming. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the agency charged with researching, cataloging, and keeping dangerous and potentially global-changing diseases in check, engaging in shoddy and unsafe practices at their lab in Atlanta, Georgia, that could lead to disastrous incidents. Hype and first reaction is always high, so where does the truth lie in how alarming this really is? Welcome to MidPoint, the former Director of Compliance and Security at Southern Research, a recognized expert on biosafety, bioterror, and bioweapons. Deborah Sharp joins us today on MidPoint. Deborah, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Deborah, you have heard a lot of this and what the CDC has said. So let's start right there. This broke as a story, and we heard about diseases being kept in Ziploc bags and being transferred. And already you start thinking of all sorts of Hollywood scenarios of diseases getting out into the air and infecting millions of people at once. Give us a little bit of the pullback here and the fact of really where we're at in all this.
Well, in general terms, the laboratories are designed to have inward directional airflow, and there are many protocols and procedures that are in place to protect the outside space of the laboratory and to protect the inside space of the occupants working in the lab. Generally, you don't transfer organisms in Ziploc baggies, but you do transfer them in leak-proof, crush-proof containers as you're moving things around the laboratory. But for the most part, you are working in what's called primary containment. So they're biosafety cabinets that have inward directional airflow also to protect the scientists working in that space.
But these were serious mistakes. And again, I hate to go into the hyperbole range here. I think too many people do it all the time here. But could something have systemically happened here that would have not only affected the individuals at the CDC, but could have partially been the bigger part of another bio-emergency?
I think what is coming out is not so much this one isolated incident, but more of a persistent record of policies and procedures that may not be in place to ensure that the other incidents that were identified in the GAO report and other inspections from USDA APHIS. I think the issue here, and I have seen this in other institutions as well as a consultant, is that there's not an institutional approach to safety management and biosafety management. And I think that's really what's lacking.
We just saw some video of Tom Frieden here, the head of the CDC. So when you talk about being in charge and the things that need to be done here, is it fair to say that under his watch things have gotten sloppy?
No, I wouldn't say necessarily under his watch things have gotten sloppy. I think probably things have not changed significantly over time, whereas the rest of the private sector has been audited for a long time as a result of the new select agent regs. I say new, they came out 2003, and we all were inspected extensively. But I understand what it's like to walk into an organization that did not historically have institutional control and institutional safety management system. And when that happens, when there's nothing there, scientists make decisions at the benchtop and laboratorians make decisions at the benchtop, not intending to do anything malicious, but because there's nothing in place for them to fall back on, there's no rigorous controls that say, you're not going to make a decision on how to inactivate this anthrax unless it's been reviewed and approved by an outside committee of your peers. Most of the institutions that have select agent registration have committees called IBCs. So they're institutional biological safety committees where work is, the description of the work goes to the committee, and the committee either approves or rejects it or asks for modification of the research.
When you
and I'm not sure that those are in place at CDC.
When you just said that there's nothing there, would that indicate then perhaps to this point we've been lucky that something hasn't escaped the CDC lab and that something has really come to the level of a national, maybe a global emergency?
I wouldn't say that we have been lucky necessarily. I think that there's a lot of other engineering controls and PPE controls and things that are in place to protect laboratorians and to protect the public health. I do think it is very, very concerning to me that inadvertently high-path avian influenza was sent to an APHIS laboratory thinking it was low-path avian influenza. I mean, I don't know all the details of that incident. I look forward to finding out how that actually occurred, but that is something that is very, very concerning to me.
I got a little over a minute left here. Is it scary then that these people who are experts in the field are inside the lab and they're making what many people seem to indicate are rudimentary mistakes?
No, I think people make the mistake thinking scientists, because they're expert in their particular field of research, they understand all of the safety implications and safety management systems. I think for the most part, what I find in these laboratories is that the scientists and the staff are really doing the best job that they can be doing. Where I find it lacking mostly is in the senior management approach to safety and not supporting the scientists, not providing them with an organized process of which to do the research under.
We're always looking for smaller government, at least many people are in the United States, but is it not fair to say that this is one place when we're talking about diseases like this that you need really a lot of oversight here?
I absolutely agree. And I do think that the funding issue that's been going on in our federal government in some of these laboratories and our public health labs is a huge, huge issue. And it should be a huge public safety concern.
Do you get the feeling now that after this they're getting it, or are we going to get more basic snow jobs?
You know, until we can get Congress to actually do something and stop all of the infighting and bickering, you know, I don't see how we're going to resolve this. It is a very, very serious issue, though.
Infighting, bickering, and we're talking about bird flu here with people potentially dying. You have just given us the scary moment of the day, but we're with you. This is something that needs a whole lot more when it comes down to government look in government oversight in this. Deborah Sharp, thank you so much for joining us. We will stay in touch. We will continue to follow this story.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, on to a studio in Manhattan to uncover what's cooking on the Steve Malzberg Show, plus what you're used to and what you desperately need every single day at this time, the snappy repartee between Steve and yours truly that makes life worth living. That and more coming up right here on MidPoint.
Do you sleep too hot while your partner sleeps too cool? Do you struggle to sleep at the right temperature? Now Sleep Number has a solution that's as revolutionary as its beds. Introducing the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer. The amazing Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer allows both of you to select your ideal temperature for better sleep. The Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer works with any mattress brand. It features active air technology, which evenly distributes air to heat and cool each side to the temperature you prefer for head-to-toe comfort. Call or click now for this free $50 savings card and catalog.
My husband and I both prefer different temperatures. He likes to have his side of the bed a little bit warmer, and I like to have mine a little bit cooler, and we are finally sleeping better together.
After sleeping on the dual temp layer, I find that I have such a restful night's sleep that when I wake up in the morning, I am energized and I'm ready for the day.
All night long, you can each enjoy sleep at a temperature that perfectly matches what your body needs for comfortable sleep, so you can sleep better together. In a research study, 75% reported poor sleep because of their sleeping temperature. That's because your body's temperature naturally fluctuates at night. But with the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer, you can sleep comfortably warm or cool. And because the revolutionary Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer helps solve an important sleep problem, it was selected as a very innovative product by Good Housekeeping. Remember, the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer can be added to any mattress brand, so everyone can enjoy sleeping better at the perfect temperature. Call or click now.
Call 1-800-317-5283 or click now for a free $50 savings card and catalog with price list. For your peace of mind, the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer comes with a 100-night in-home trial. Call 1-800-317-5283 or click now. That's 1-800-317-5283 for your free $50 savings card and catalog.
Can you really lose weight without changing your lifestyle? LaToya Q did. In fact, in just 5 months, she lost nearly 2 pounds a week without changing the way she dieted or exercised.
I lost 36 pounds and I went down 4 dress sizes.
Like so many people, LaToya didn't want to change her lifestyle to lose weight. Instead, she decided to take America's #1 selling diet pill, Lipozene.
People kept asking me, "Are you you have to be exercising? You're really you just don't want to tell us what you're doing." I was like, "No, I don't have time to go to a gym. I just took Lipozene and I started seeing results immediately."
Lipozene has now sold over 20 million bottles. That's because Lipozene really works. And to prove it, we conducted our very own double-blind clinical study where all we asked people to do was take Lipozene. And by just taking Lipozene, they lost weight. But here's where it gets really exciting. These people were not asked to change their diet or exercise. And 78% of the weight they lost was pure body fat. Not water, fat.
I'm almost back down to my high school weight, so I'm really loving that.
And for even faster results, you can try Lipozene with moderate diet and exercise.
Feels great to have a six-pack. I didn't think I would have it at my age.
I lost 7 inches off of my waist and I lost 2 dress sizes and I feel amazing.
Now you can join the millions of people who have lost weight with Lipozene by trying it risk-free for only $29.95. Lipozene is guaranteed to help you lose weight or your money back.
Lipozene, it works.
But wait, call in the next 10 minutes and we'll double your order absolutely free. Plus, we'll even pay for your shipping. But that's still not all. To celebrate selling over 20 million bottles of Lipozene, the company will give you a free bottle of Metabo Up with your order. That's a $20 value free. But you must call right now because this exclusive free offer is not available in stores.
Call 1-800-509-9436. That's 1-800-509-9436. All right, the part of the show that is recorded, it is replayed, it is tweeted, it is up on YouTube, it is everywhere. It gets millions of views every single day. It is the snappy repartee between yours truly and Steve Malzberg as we're ready to join the Steve Malzberg Show right after us on MidPoint right here on the Newsmax TV network. So, Steve, let's go ahead. We'll get down some snappy repartee. Where would you like to start? Snappy now.
Well, I mean, we have two court decisions today, both
snappy.
on different ends of the same issue. That's snappy. And, of course, I think this will expedite the Affordable Care Act viability issue to the Supreme Court, and that's a good thing. And it's going to be very interesting to see, because if they take away the subsidy part of it, then I don't see how the act could survive. Aside from Obama, of course, just saying, hey, I don't care what anybody says, you can do it.
It was almost
which he's done before.
The usual darkly entertaining stuff here when you see the first decision come down and then you read a little bit more into it, and it talks about how it comes down to the way the language was written in the original document itself,
right,
which then makes you think, okay, I don't know why, but suddenly I hearkened back to Nancy Pelosi. You don't know what's in it until you pass it, and then you find out what's in it.
Right.
I'd like to go back and say, well, you don't know how it's written until you check it 3, 4, 5, 6 times and make sure that it's
Right.
written correctly. They couldn't even get that right.
And I'll tell you what, there's no way on the face of the earth the Republicans are ever going to allow it to be rewritten and change those words. So that isn't going to happen. And then, of course, we have so much going on with the Middle East and John Kerry and the non-ceasefire and the U.S. stopping all flights to Israel. Now, there's a lot of controversy about stopping the flights to Israel. I heard a former Israeli ambassador say that this is not a good decision by the FAA, and they should reconsider, because there's just as good a chance as terrorists being able to hit Ben Gurion Airport as airports in Jordan and other Middle East countries. And if you give Hamas this victory, it's just going to embolden them. So we'll see what happens with that. But Kerry, again, obsessed with this, hey, let's have a ceasefire, then we'll talk about all the issues. Really? Hamas is going to get a grievance list submitted if they cease fire? I don't see that happening on Israel's part, so I don't know what Kerry's talking about.
No, the thing that I caught that was interesting when I was watching a lot of the interviews yesterday, when they were talking about occupation, and there were those saying, well, that occupation still sits as a possibility for the Israelis. I just can't go with that. I just don't see where they would want to get involved again and go back in and occupy Gaza. That seems to me, and many of the experts that we've talked to, just say it's a disastrous black hole waiting to happen.
No, but they absolutely, they don't want to have anything to do with Gaza. On the other hand, they do have to get rid of every tunnel and every rocket and every Hamas fighter if they possibly can. So, Barack Obama might think they've done enough and think it's time for a ceasefire, but I don't think Israel would agree.
On a completely lighter note then, the Tony Dungy incident is, I like that, the Tony Dungy incident, the words that he said the last 24 hours where the NFL coach said he would not have drafted openly gay football player Michael Sam if it came around to his time, and he's being hammered by a lot of people for doing it. Quite frankly, it's the way he feels, it's his opinion, and he is also a very religious man who has said he'll let people live and let live, but he just doesn't think it would be good for the team. I think he's allowed to say that.
He said that it would be a lot to deal with. And, of course, in 2007, he supported an Indiana group hoping to define marriages between a man and a woman. So they're really tearing them apart, because imagine supporting traditional marriage. You must be a real homophobe. And they're going after Tony Dungy, unfairly, of course. And Michael Sam, in my view, has always wanted to make this about him being gay. By constantly saying it's not about him being gay, yet wearing the rainbow flag and signing with Oprah Winfrey, not telling the league or the team, and then having to cancel. He was planning on bringing cameras into training camp, into the clubhouse and everything for his TV series. Give me a break. It's all about him being gay. And he's going to make millions and millions of dollars off of it, and God bless him. But then don't tell us you just want to play football and don't want to be known as the gay football player, when in fact you do want to be known as the gay football player. And I think that's the very distraction Tony Dungy's talking about.
It's a story we're going to follow, and you will as well, my friend. Steve, have a great show. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Ed.
Reminder once again, the Steve Malzberg Show follows us every day right here on MidPoint, 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock Eastern Time. And don't forget America's Forum, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern Time, right here on the Newsmax TV network. We're back at noon. Rock on, true believers. Thank you so much for joining us. We're back for a Wednesday right here on MidPoint, where we question everything.